Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy time zone, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Identity Crisis. And I think this is going to be the last one, since we got the point that we're writing code and we got you all the way from what is identity to actually implementing identity. For this one, I'll still be driving solo and just for the first hour, because at 9 a.m. Pacific time or 12 p.m. Eastern time, JP will be joining us and we'll have a fantastic guest, LaBrina Loving. I mean, that's an awesome name. And she's coming to talk to us about B2C, B2B, multitenancy, and how it all comes together. But for the first hour, we will be focusing on the identity platform libraries and what it is and what it isn't and what can you build with it and why it is so much fun to work with it. So thanks for joining me this morning. And I hope that today we're going to learn some interesting things. Let me know where you are from, what you're working right now. Use the chat if you have any questions. And I'm excited to be here. Hopefully you are too. Okay, so we've covered quite a few things up until this point. We probably had 8 or 9 episodes covering flows, covering protocols, covering standards. And today I'm just going to go through the libraries and then build a few things, run them, see how they work, how they're put together, some specific patterns that we use for MSAL, and hopefully that will answer some questions. And then if you have any questions during the stream, obviously feel free to let us know or let me know. Let's start with the basis of the libraries. Now, I have my official documentation open on the page, and this is where usually you can come in and find how to build stuff with our libraries. If this is the first time that you come across the library, then you don't have any prior knowledge to that, and this is great because it is a little bit confusing considering that we have 2 libraries right now out there in the wild. We have ADAL, the old library, the Azure AD Authentication Library, which is going to be discontinued as of June 30th, 2022. So you have technically a year and 3 months to migrate from ADAL. ADAL was the old library. It was targeting the V1 endpoint, and it was not as efficient as it should be. So we came up with a new version called MSAL. And hey Prons, nice to see you from the south coast of the UK. I hope the weather is nicer there today than it is here in Seattle. So yeah, ADAL has been around for a while, and we do know that a lot of systems use it still out there. And ideally, you should be looking at migrating. If you need some support in migration, if you need some advice, reach out to us via Discord or reach out through our official channel. You have our emails and our Twitter handles. So you can always reach out and ask questions, or if you get stuck, we have people that can help you migrate from ADAL. But the whole point there is that ADAL will not be supported anymore. Your applications will still run, by the way. It doesn't mean that your applications won't run, but they will not get the support they need or the upgrades that they need. And hey, Rocklane, East Coast USA, nice. Thank you for joining us. So let's assume that you're very new to identity. What's Discord? Oh yeah, Discord is, it's like Slack. I had a nice statement like Discord is Slack for Gen Xers, or Gen X is Discord for, Discord is Slack for Gen Xers. I can't remember. One of these things. Anyway, it's a new platform to communicate, and we have a very vibrant community on Discord. The link is at the very top of the stream, so you can see ak.ms/45. So Discord join. This is where people can come and ask questions. Sometimes we discuss about solutions. Sometimes we discuss about technology in general. It's been for gamers, but I don't know if you've seen the news. But Microsoft may be acquiring Discord. I'm not breaking the news as the first thing. It's been on Twitter since yesterday. So yeah, the link is just at the very top, just at the top of the stream. You should see the number of links. If it's not as visible, maybe we should rethink about how our positioning is placed over there. But yeah, Discord could be acquired by Microsoft. I'm not saying we will. I'm just saying that there's been a lot of chatter out there. And it's a fantastic way to build communities, right? You join Discord, you can join different rooms, different channels, and then you can communicate and ask questions or be part of the community. It's been predominantly for gamers, and it is very big on Twitch because anyone that is streaming on Twitch apparently has a Discord. That's why we have one as well. But yeah, we've been helping quite a few people over there, and the community is growing. So make sure you join us. So yeah, where were we? We were the libraries. We're talking about MSAL. So you're new to identity, MSAL is the best place to start. Yeah, we'll open source Discord. That's a good idea. With GitHub. So if you need to build stuff with identity, the Microsoft identity, we recommend that you start with MSAL, especially if you're very new, because all our samples and everything else work with MSAL. However, it doesn't mean that you have to use MSAL if you don't want to. If you already have an OAuth 2 compatible library, an OpenID Connect compliant library, then you can use that library as well. So if your solution already uses a mature library out there that is compliant with OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect, all you have to do is just point to, well, maybe that's not the right statement. What you would have to do is usually point to the Azure AD endpoints and then change some configuration. Some packages may require additional plugins. For example, Passport for Node.js has an Azure AD component. It's a separate package that you need to bring in. So Passport, the authentication library for Node, works with Azure AD. But it's a simple plugin you download and run. But let's go back to MSAL. What is MSAL? MSAL is a library that covers most of the major languages, and we're coming with more and more and more as we go through. All these libraries have a public repo as well, which means they can go to our GitHub and find where the library is going. Sometimes we have roadmap information there. We also have GitHub issues, so if you come across a problem, you can search in the issues and see what's happening. And you'll see here, we actually redid the whole page as of maybe a month ago, just to make it a little bit more applicable. So now we categorize the libraries based on the app that you're trying to build, which makes a lot more sense since they tend to be grouped together in a logical way like this. So if you are building anything with JavaScript, which means that you're probably going to be writing some single page application, whether it's a vanilla JavaScript or something like Angular or React, then we have the libraries for you. You'll also notice that our libraries have a V1 and a V2, or no version and a V2 version. Ideally, you want to be on the latest version because the latest version will support authorization code with PKCE. PKCE. Proof key for code exchange. For PKCE, it's not a PIXIE, which I thought when I started in the division, everybody was like, PKCE is supported. And I was like, okay, what is PKCE? So when I started looking for it, it is not PIXIE, it's PKCE. But the whole point of PKCE and authorization code is that your token exchange and the code exchange will be a lot more secure rather than using the implicit flow in the older libraries. So the Angular here, this specific one is the old one, whereas the MSAL Angular v2 is the new one. Then we have JavaScript, which is something you can use. Can I paste this URL? Of course I can paste this URL. Let me do that. Thank you, Claudio, right? Apologies if I am screwing up the names, but I put it on the chat. There you go. So you should be able to grab it. And then JavaScript, if you're building vanilla JavaScript code and you don't want to use a framework, and then we also have React. However, with JavaScript, which is called Angular MSAL, MSAL browser, you can actually build other apps as well, like Vue or Aurelia. We've done some samples before where we tag directly into the JavaScript MSAL library, and then we use it inside our Vue. It just means that we don't have a Vue component, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it with Vue or other frameworks. So JavaScript MSAL browser is the one to use for anything you need. Now you'll notice that the project has a different name and the package name has a different name. Can we get a single token for the scopes which we use in the Azure AD app? You can get a single token for the same resource. So if you are calling into Graph, for example, you can get a single token for all your Graph scopes. However, if you have multiple APIs or multiple resources, you have to get different tokens for different resources. We did cover this one yesterday on our MS Learn certification workshop that we're doing. If you want to go and catch up with that, we covered that yesterday. It will be, or it is on YouTube right now. So if we jump on YouTube, let me just find the link for you, friends, and we'll do it in a second. So we covered all that yesterday about which clients to use, when to use them, why to use them, and so on. So if I go into my videos, just gonna open or share the playlist with you. This one. So the playlist, and that was module 3, is here. Go crazy. It's about 2 hours. The workshop is also public, so you can go and follow along on the workshop. And it's a great workshop to help you understand how you can acquire resources and what have you. Sorry, tokens for resources. So yeah, we talked about auth code with Pixie. Yeah, it is recommended. That's the whole point there. And implicit grant flow. We want to avoid this as much as we can, considering that it is the least secure one when it comes to working with the Microsoft Identity Platform. In fact, not just the Microsoft Identity Platform, anything that uses that is less secure. So if you are on a different kind of platform, then again, you want to avoid it and try to move to the latest one. Let me find, where is my window with the stream? Somewhere around here. Okay, we got it. Cool. Let's go to the next one. Dun, dun, dun. Web applications. So one thing to notice here, that this library will be running on the customer or the client browser, which means that it is a public, not a confidential client. We cannot trust the fact that it's running on the client browser, and therefore that code is accessible to everyone. So it is treated as a public client, and we can't put any secrets. Whereas with web applications, because they're running on the server and they're inaccessible by the end user, we can use confidential clients. Now there are a few flavors here, so it will get a little bit confusing as we cover the libraries, but bear with me as we cover especially the .NET one. So for .NET, we have different flavors. We have the full .NET framework, then we have .NET 3, .NET Core 3.1, 3 and 3.1, and then we have .NET 5 now, and there's a little bit of convergence. So if you are using the traditional or the full FAT framework prior to .NET 5, you will have to use MSAL.NET for acquiring tokens. You need to use the ASP.NET security here to acquire your ID tokens, and then MSAL to go and get your access tokens. It is a little bit confusing, I know, bear with me. So in the old ASP.NET, is it old? How old do I sound? In the traditional ASP.NET, you would go through the wizard and say, file new project, and I want authentication, and it would add the appropriate libraries for you. Unfortunately, it did not MSAL. So that meant that you could authenticate the user, but when it came to acquiring tokens, you actually had to go and download and implement MSAL for yourself, which is the case here. And that's how you would do it. And we thought that this experience sucked a lot because it left quite a bit to be desired. People needed to understand that acquiring ID tokens was different to acquiring access tokens, and that was a bit of a mess. So with ASP.NET Core 3.1 and later, we added a new library called the Microsoft Identity Web Library. This follows later on you'll see there's also a Microsoft Identity Client library. And the whole point there is that we wrap everything in one library, so you don't have to worry about ID tokens, access tokens, how and where to get them. We will show some coding in a little bit on how to implement the Microsoft Identity.Web, which is the new world. So ASP.NET 3.1 and later will all support Microsoft Identity.Web. Now this library here is only for web. You can't use it for desktop apps. but you can use it for Azure Functions, Azure Web Apps, gRPC, ASP.NET, MVC, ASP.NET Razor Pages, Blazor Server, no Blazor Client. For Blazor Client, we actually wrap around the MSAL JavaScript library, the MSAL browser one. But it is abstracted for you, so you don't see that when you play with Blazor Client. Then we have Java, which is now using MSAL4J. That's the official library. However, that's important here because MSAL4J will only help you acquire access tokens. You still need something to authenticate the user in the front end. Although we did change that, so now you can actually sign in users. Check that out. We actually support signing in users. And see how I said the MSAL.NET does not support signing in users? It doesn't. There you go. So here with MSAL4J, we support both signing in users and accessing the other APIs, right? Acquiring access tokens. Node.js, we have the official MSAL node, which is very new. It has just come out, so let's jump into that. I wanted to go to the repo, so apologies for that. That should be there. So if we open this one, this is the Microsoft Authentication Library for Node, MSAL Node, but it does not support all the Node scenarios. So one of the things that we do not support is building APIs. So you can build desktop apps, for example, Electron apps that call web APIs. You can build a web app that calls web APIs. My face just drops. They just added support for web API that calls web APIs. How awesome is that? I need to see that example running, by the way. Can Azure Functions do gRPC? Hey, Bruce Lane and Roscoe, Azure Functions doing gRPC? I haven't tested that scenario. That is a very good question. You can actually fire off a tweet to the team and say, hey guys, does that support? Actually, let's do that. Let's call the Azure Functions team and see if that is supported. What say you, friends? Let's do this. Pam, pam, pam. Liking my own tweet, isn't it fun? So what should we say? Hey, Azure Functions team, does the framework support gRPC with .NET, I assume? With .NET? Yeah, should we do that? CC Jeff Holland. Done and done. Send. We'll find out in a little bit. So yeah, okay, ask the question. Can we get a SAML token from the Azure AD app with MSAL? I have the resource configured which gives me the SAML token, but I was not able to use MSAL to get it. Haven't tested that scenario. I will need to find out. Rocklane, ping me on Discord when we can follow up there. So now we support web APIs to web APIs. That is a surprise because the last time we tried to do that, it was not supporting it. So there might be some samples. And you see we have public clients, we have also confidential clients, which is pretty cool. There should be samples somewhere. Samples, there you go. And we also have Azure AD samples and B2C samples. Now the question is, on behalf of OAuth2 to call web API. Web API validates the token and calls that. Ooh, interesting. So this is using both. Let's see if that's the right one. So you got Express, which are front end, command line, Express app using OAuth2 to acquire a token, so the silent flow, client credentials for a daemon app. Now, why did they change? Why are they using different terms for command line and daemon? If somebody can tell me. I guess that daemon is non-interactive and this one is interactive because it's using the device code flow. Okay, so that probably explains that. But I want to see this one, the on behalf of. Web API, check this out. We now have support for Web API, I hope. Let's see, index.js. It is using MSAL node validate JOT token or JWT. If you say JOT, you can summon JP. So we have validate JWT, the header comes in. Then we have the validate options for the audience, and there's a config, we need to go and look at that. Plus the authority, and you just call jwt.verify. Where's the JWT configured? Oh, JSON web token, it's a separate library. So this one verifies it. Get signing keys, JWKS client here. So that's a separate library. I just want to see where MSAL is used. Get signing key, config, confidential client here. And then on behalf of request. Oh, there you go. So we are using MSAL to acquire the token on behalf of the calling user. So the web app calls the API, and the API calls Azure AD once it validates the token to acquire a token to call another resource. So API to API calls. That is sweet. However, it's great that we can do on behalf of, but we're not using MSAL to validate the tokens, which is okay. And then we can call graph with the acquired token. But you know what? This is super exciting. I like the fact that we now have a proper sample that does API to API and API token validation. Although you do need these two things here. And I want to see what, so we have, the key and the signing, and then we have the authority and the client ID. Client secret is missing. But because it is a confidential client, it means that we can have a client secret there. It is running away from the client browser. Love it. Love it. Then we have Python. And if you are adventurous, we also have an MSAL for Go. MSAL for Go, which is, I think, in preview right now. And it's in the process of being updated. We do have updates as of 4 days ago. And it's a new edition, not yet in public preview. Did I ruin the surprise? No, it's in the public domain, so you can find it. So it's technically private preview, but not public preview, so it's not fully supported. And there's a good chance that it might get updated. But this is something that you can start playing around today. We also had a stream in the past with one of our cloud advocates that came to show us how we can build Go apps with MSAL. And that was awesome. So if you are into Go, give this a go. See? Pun intended. Totally. I segue myself into that. Okay. Let's go back to the libraries. Let's see what else we have. Desktop applications. This is again a confidential client, and we support Electron via MSAL Node.js. So that means you can create cross-platform UI-based applications on Electron. If you don't know, VS Code is running on Electron. Quite a few other tools run on Electron. I think it's also Teams that runs on Electron. Java, macOS, Swift, you have UWP, and then WPF. And then we have mobile applications. We support Android, directly Android. So there's an MSAL for Android dedicated to that. There's an Android for Kotlin. So we support that via MSAL Android. Then we have, because I think the same Java library can be consumed by Kotlin apps, so you don't have to have a Kotlin specific library, if that makes sense. So for iOS, we have MSAL for iOS, and then for Xamarin, we have MSAL.NET. And this is the Microsoft Identity Client, not the web, it's the client. In fact, I'm doing a session later on today showing how you can build Xamarin applications with MSAL and how you can call Azure AD or B2C, depending on the needs of your application. And finally, service and daemon. We support, again, because the languages are there, we support .NET, Java, Node, Python, and Go, experimental. Which one is preview? What does it say here? Apply to libraries in public preview. Oh, supplemental terms, okay. And then we have, now obviously with MSAL and daemons, you can only acquire tokens to call downstream APIs. You cannot have an interactive session, right? I mean, you could, but it's not ideal because you don't want to have somebody interacting with your daemon app all the time. So if you're building them, then the expectation is that they will be running unattended. And for that reason, we don't expect to sign in users. We already use client credentials or a certificate with client credentials to go and access APIs and do some work for on your behalf. And there you go. I think that covers most of the major frameworks out there, or most of the major apps. If you're building something else, please do let me know, but I think it would be super exotic and not covered by this one. So shall we write some code? Shall we? Okay, let's do AD portal. There are a few ways to get started, and we'll go through the easy way and then we'll do the coding way, right? So for this one, we're going to sign in with my test tenant. If you don't have a test tenant, you can easily go and get one at the Microsoft, sorry, that's not the one I want to do. It should be +++, make it big, so everybody can see. The whole point here is that if you want to play around with Azure AD and you don't, with Azure AD and you don't have a subscription, or you don't have Office 365, so if you don't have an Azure AD Azure subscription, or Office 365, which comes with free Azure AD technically, you can go and create a Microsoft 365 developer account. Microsoft 365 developer program. And I will put the link in the chat so everybody can go and start using that today. The whole point of this one is that you get 3 months of a full-blown Azure AD. I think it's an E5, so you get everything you need. You also get sample data, users, graph data, emails, calendar information, so you can play around with calling these APIs. Just be aware that it doesn't come with an Azure subscription. So if you deploy to Azure, you need to have a different subscription that you can use, but you can still use this Azure AD. However, if you already have Azure, then you already have an Azure AD. So I don't know. But sometimes, I want to use a tenant that gives me full permissions. I can act as an admin and still run on my Microsoft tenant. And that's a scenario that is probably supported, because in this Microsoft developer tenant, you will be the god of that tenant. It means that you don't have to go to anyone to provide admin consent for using any permission you want. So that's a nice scenario. And since most of the tests that we do or samples require elevated permissions, it's nice to know that you have a tenant that allows you to do that. So back to our Azure AD. We're going to create a brand new app registration. We talked about app registrations on the previous stream of Identity Crisis. So here I'm going to register an app. At some point, I think my internet is slow today. Or did I break Azure AD? As somebody said yesterday. There you go. I don't know, some weird bug. I'm running Pi-hole, by the way, so I'm dubious that things may be slowing down because of Pi-hole, protecting my network from ads. But let's see. So let's put a sample node test, and I'm not a node. Oh, sorry, what should I say? SPA test. Sample SPA test. Fine. It's not a node app. Test. And I'm not going to change anything else here. I'm just going to say register. And since I am very new to this platform, I'm just going to go with the quick starts. Quick starts are freaking awesome. If you haven't used them before, I would highly recommend them, because they will do the configuration for you. And let's go and do that example. Remember, we talked about JavaScript authentication code flow. We don't want to use the implicit flow. We should put a giant red X below that say do not use. So I'll click on JavaScript, and since I don't know what I need to change, I will let the quick start guide me. So first of all, it says this code sample is going to use a redirect URI of localhost 3000. So when we download and run this app, it will be running at port 3000. So let's go and make the changes for us. So here it's going to add the redirect URI, and it will make the update. And I will show you where it made the update, by the way. Configuring. It's not much to configure. Come on, you can do it. Is it one of these mornings? Tan, tan, tan. Oh, there you go. And just to show you what it did, it added a platform called Single Page App. If you were to do it yourself, you would come here and click on this, and then it configured the redirect URI for us, so we know where the tokens should be received. You know, so we're not using implicit flow down here, and we're only using accounts from our organization. And that's it. That's all we need to actually run this application. So let's go and download it. Although, I think I lost my download. Oh, there you go. Still there. Let's go and download this thing. This puppy. Let's download this puppy. Show in folder. So I'm gonna grab that. Nope. I'm gonna grab that and put it into my projects so I can open it in a second. So while I am copy pasting stuff like a pro, paste. Is this not how most developers do it? Copy pasting? Stack Overflow driven development. And I'll open my terminal. Woo! Look at those tokens over there. I was playing around earlier on. It's always fun. Please don't dox me. Don't copy that token line by line. Okay, so let's come out. Let's see where we are. So it's MS Identity JavaScript v2. So let's change directory into this one. And let's open in code. I want to see the code. Show me the code. Show me the code. Oh, you know what? Am I getting... Oh, I'm not getting weird light. Okay. What do we have here? What do we have here? So there's a little bit of a boilerplate node stuff to run the application. However, it is a single page app running on the browser, and the meat is in the app. Let me make this bigger. So we have one important file, which is the UI of the application. It calls into CDN to get the MSAL browser for us. And then further down, it has a couple of buttons as vanilla JavaScript. There's a sign in, sign out, kind of a messaging that happens. Then there are a couple of buttons to interact with Graph. And we'll see them in action in a little bit. And that's all it is. Then we have 3 files that we're calling into. So the first one is the UI.js. This is the file responsible for changing the UI. So when we sign in, it says, hey, welcome X. And when you sign out, it says you need to sign in. And it also renders the data as they come in from Graph. There is a lot of code here just to render what comes back from the calls. And then we have the auth config. This is the important one. This is where we configure our MSAL. And it doesn't contain much. In terms of configuration, you just need to point it to the client ID, which is the one that we just created. That client ID can be found here. Just to prove the point, they should match. It's a 4F10. So that should be 4F10. Perfect, it matches. Then the authority is my test tenant that I'm using right now, my developer tenant. And then finally, the redirect URI. Remember the HTTP localhost 3000. This is where I'm expecting my tokens, and this is what we configured in the application, or what the quick wizard configured for us. See, so this matches, match and match, match made in heaven. And then we have some settings for the cache, where we want to store the tokens to enable single sign-on, and how the tabs will be behaving when we open the same app in multiple tabs. And finally, there's some logging information here. You could, in effect, remove that and it will still work absolutely fine. Then we have 2 options for authenticating. We have a pop-up and a redirect. When you interact with the MSAL library and Azure AD, you either get a pop-up or a redirect. The recommendation is to use a pop-up, but there are some browsers that are technically limited in displaying pop-ups, like Safari on mobile. So therefore, redirect is also there to allow you to switch back and forth. So let's look at the code here. We have a login pop-up. Let's see, all the way at the top. So first is selecting an account. So once we sign in, we say get me one account. If there's no accounts, then there's an issue. If there is an account, then choose that account. Otherwise, there are multiple accounts and you need to select one. Then we have the handle response, which is what happens once we sign in. So if I sign in, we won't display the username somewhere, so show welcome message. But the meat the important bit here is the login and the sign out, or the sign in and the sign out. So MSAL, our instantiated client library for Microsoft Identity, has a login pop-up method that we pass the login request, which is defined up here. And then where the hell is the login request? We'll find in a bit. Right, so here we just say login, and then once we log in, which is a one-liner, we just handle the response, and if there is an error, we just display the error. Maybe you try to sign in to the wrong tenant, or you use the wrong account that is not available to that tenant, and this is what will happen. So this is all it takes to actually sign in with the MSAL library in JavaScript. And the logout is even simpler. It just says, just log me out for this specific account, in effect. So the logout request contains one object, which is the account that you want to sign out from. And then there's the get token pop-up, which we use to acquire a token for APIs. And this practice is standard. This pattern that you see here will be standard when you work with MSAL. So the first thing that we need to do is find the current account. And then from there, we need to use the acquire token silent method. We don't want to prompt the user for signing in or accepting stuff or interacting with the UI. Every single time we need to acquire a token. So the very first time that we present them with this acquire token silent, it will fail because there's no token in the cache, and because the user has probably not consented to what the app is going to do. They will be presented with a pop-up, which we will see in a second. But the next time, if they should just go into the acquire token silent, and if the scopes have not changed, then they will automatically get the token, right? Now, if there is an error, there is a situation where there will be an expected error. Azure AD will throw an MSAL interaction required auth error, and that changes from a platform to platform in terms of the wording. But in effect, what we're saying here is that we couldn't find the token in the cache. We couldn't find the access token in the cache. So let's go and interactively sign into Azure AD and accept the token, right? So this is what will happen here. This exception needs to be captured so we can display the message. And once that happens, then we use the acquire token pop-up to go and interactively access or grab the token. And then once it gets passed down, we log it. Please don't log your access tokens. This is just for display purposes. And then we return the login, the response to do something. In effect, we return the token back into our code so it can go and call other APIs. So that's very important. This is the format here, the way we do it. And then we have cProfile and read email, which in effect will use the get token pop-up, and technically that should just do a silent acquisition of the token if it's there, and then use that token to call graph. And then there's another file here. There's a graph. There's a graph wrapper or a graph file that in effect will go and call graph for us. And you'll notice that here we're expected to pass a token, which is added to the headers as an authorization header, which has the format of bearer plus the token. So if everything works according to plan, we should get the data. Now let's run this baby and see what happens. First, we need to do npm install, npm I, and then we need to do npm start. It is listening on port 3000, so let's go and see what this baby looks like. So many local hosts over here. Sign in. Let's do this. This giant sign in. So we need to use the right account. Remember, I'm using my test tenant, so we'll go with this one. And check this out. Again, I covered all these on my MS Learn module yesterday. So if you want to understand how this works and why we get this prompt, then check out the consent and permission framework module that we did yesterday. What we see here is a prompt for us to consent. Me as a user, I have to give the application permissions to go and look into my data, and the application needs to know that I am happy with that. So there's a trust framework here that I know what the app is asking for. Because if it was asking, for example, for some random data, like I want to see your OneDrive data, I'm like, why? I'm just signing into an app that will show me my emails. Why do you need access to my OneDrive? That also gives you a nice pointer to what the app is going to do with your data. And we talked about best practices and what have you, but this is very similar to what your mobile apps will do. Every time you install them and run them, you'll get, hey, this application is going to access or requires access to all these things. Do you want to provide access? If not, then you know why. So right now we just say I want to sign in and I want to have offline access. So we want to have a refresh token so you can go and refresh the stuff for us. Since I'm an admin, I can also consent on behalf of the organization, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to do that for everyone. Also, if you ever come across something that looks super suspicious or an app that you were not prompted to sign in, make sure you report it down here. It's like a super tiny report. I don't know if you can see it. And then finally, I will press accept. So that will sign me in. And then I can see my profile, which is great. This is the information that I acquired as part of the ID token. We haven't done any calls to the graph yet. So let's go and see the profile. So that will be user.read. That's the scope that we need for that. Just thinking about it. Did I not press the button? Oh, sorry. I have already done that. So that was part of the profile? Yeah. So now, check this out. We're using dynamic consent. So I haven't consented to the app reading my emails yet. And the nice thing is that I don't have to pre-configure that in Azure Active Directory app registration either. I can just say, go and get me the scope. So as long as the user has permissions to access that data, which is my data now, and I have permission, I can do that. So let's say I accept. And it will come back with the data from my test tenant, which is awesome, by the way. I always have test data here in my tenant to display. And there you go. That's all it took. So let's go and do, so that was the JavaScript example. And we have all these samples on GitHub as well, so you can go and find them. You don't have to create a new app registration, although having them working end to end is super cool. So now let's go and create a .NET and ASP.NET Core app. ASP.NET Core test. Just I want to show you the comparison between the JavaScript and how much code it took there to .NET and how much code it will take. Again, accounts for my organization. I will say register, and here because I know what the authentication will look like, I want to add a platform. Yes, we're doing a web, and it will be HTTPS localhost 5001 since Kestrel is running that, and sign in OIDC. I'm not going to use implicit grant flow here for now. Configure. It's configuring. Okay. And then we just need to create a new .NET Core app. So let's stop this one. Let's come out from this directory. Let's bring it to the top. And let's say .NET new web app. So Razor Pages, /auth, single org. And then we'll do identity crisis. So this command will go and create a new web app for us. It will configure, well, it will download the appropriate libraries and will bootstrap the code for Azure Active Directory. And if we change into identity crisis and open any code, we can navigate through the code and see what we have there. Let's go and check our libraries first. So here you'll notice that we have, let me close this one. we have two important libraries, the Microsoft Identity.web, yes, and web.ui. So these are the brand new libraries that we talked about that allow you to easily interact with Azure Active Directory, and we wrapped the MSAL library. So they're built on top of MSAL, but they will allow you to both sign in and acquire tokens in a very few lines of code. Then with that in mind, now that we know what the libraries are and why they're important, we have the startup, which is where we actually hook up the authentication. So here we have two lines of code, services, add authentication to the default authentication scheme, and we're using Azure AD settings. The settings are here. So as you can see, it has bootstrapped the code for us, but it hasn't configured the code for us. And then what else is here? So let's go back to the startup. Then we have so this is responsible for signing in. The add authorization, we expect all the pages to use, so we have to sign in before we use any part of the app. So that's the default policy. And down here on line 42, you'll notice add Microsoft Identity UI, which is responsible for taking us the sign-in page and the sign-out pages and interacting with Azure AD. You don't have to write code for that because it's all done for you. And you can see where that is configured inside the cert. We have a login partial. And now we're using the new area, which is Microsoft Identity, which is part of the Microsoft Identity.web.ui. And then we have two controllers, which don't exist. We don't have any account controllers here at all, but they're part of the DLO. And then we have a sign in and a sign out. And this is responsible for displaying the appropriate message. Technically, that's all we need to run the application, apart from configuring the app. Let's talk a little bit about here, other things that we can do as well. So now this will only sign us in, but it won't allow us to acquire any tokens. So if we wanted to acquire tokens, we can do enable token acquisition for downstream API. Now here you can also pass scopes if you want to. So for the first time that you sign in, we'll also acquire an access token for your downstream API, right? And then because we are going to be using access tokens, we need to be able to cast them somewhere. And we do provide you with out-of-the-box options for caching your access tokens. So you have in-memory, you can have distributed token caches and session. Distributed takes anything, SQL, Redis, Cosmos, whatever you want. It will just make it work for you as long as you configure them. So the easiest one to start with is add memory, but that means that every time you restart your app, your tokens will be gone. And that's all we need here. Now, one thing that you probably noticed, I need to do that. One thing that you probably noticed there is that we can also, and I love this one, we haven't talked about this much, but no, I think I'm gonna do that, add downstream APIs. So now if you have any helpers that call downstream APIs or wrappers, you can actually put them in here. It's like a service name. And this will do the dependency injection. And what this will do as well is will allow you to call those services without you having to go and acquire the tokens first, because they will already have the appropriate tokens passed down to them. So there will be an authorization header passed down to your solution, so to your service, which is freaking awesome. That's a great way to overcome that. But if you want to be more explicit about how these things run, there is an service acquisition. So let's go here, for example. In here, we don't have a constructor, so we can say token acquisition. No. And this injected class here, or interface, allows you to go and acquire tokens. So in the constructor, we do have a constructor. So you can say token acquisition token, and then here token, sorry. Saying token acquisition equals token. And check this out. Now I can come into my method and say token acquisition dot get access token for user async. Kaboom, done. Done. That's all you need. Pretty cool, right? It's awesome. I love the way that this is all done in single liners. So we abstract a lot of the complexity, but if you still want to double with JWT tokens, and if you still want to double with the token acquisition middleware, you can do that. So we're done web, and we have 8 more minutes. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a console app, right? So up until this point, we've used a public client with the JavaScript solution. We're using a confidential client, although you don't see it because it's nicely wrapped behind Microsoft Identity Web with ASP.NET Core. And now we're gonna see a console app, a daemon app running, and what it takes to configure that. So let me close this one down. Don't save. All that code goes to waste. Let's close this one down. And then I have a CD console. And then I'm going to open this specific solution in my stuff. So this is a console app written in .NET. And again, the format should be very similar between .NET and Node or Java apps that are running as console. Let me make this big. Let me close the file here. So what we see is extremely bad practices about putting secrets and what have you in the code. So ideally you want to use a console. I don't understand what's going on, but I am enjoying your stream. We're just explaining how the MSAL library works in different types of applications. So we went about JavaScript applications and what you need to configure them. Then we went into ASP.NET Core, and I've shown you how to bootstrap your ASP.NET Core app with Microsoft Identity Web. And now we're looking into console applications and how you use console apps to build things. So, or authenticate and acquire tokens. So if I go back into my, code here, we have a client ID, which points to the app registration that we just configured, or we have configured in the past. The tenant ID, which points to our tenant that the application is living on. And then finally the client secret. So in this instance, we're using client credentials. That's the flow that we're using to authenticate against Azure AD and then go and acquire a token. So this is our MSAL confidential client, the Microsoft Authentication Library confidential client. And then here we say, I want to create that client with a secret and with a tenant ID and build it. And then when we need to, we call the app or the confidential client to go and acquire a token for us. And then using a specific scope, which at this point is graph.microsoft.com .default. I talked about .default yesterday on the stream, so if you want to catch that, jump on Twitter. Jump on YouTube. God, I'm losing my words this morning. But because this is not an interactive session, we cannot consent for the scopes. The app needs to run unsupervised. We have already pre-consented to all these permissions. So all the app has to do is just say, I want all the default ones. All the ones that have consented for me, just pass them down. So here we're just saying for graph, I've consented to, I think it's mail, if I remember correctly. So we'll see in a second. And then we acquire the token for the client and we just dump out the access token. So I'm not bothering into using the token to go and call graph. We could, but for now I just want to display the token. So let's dox ourselves again by running the app and see what happens. So CLS this one, and then .NET run. Tan. Nice. So let's see what this token contains. Let's grab that and let's head out to the jwt.ms page. This is a great way to check out your tokens, although you should not be messing with access tokens, especially if they're for a third-party provider. This is mainly for educational reasons. So as you can see here, I've registered a confidential client, app registration, and then that app ID matches the app ID we had in the code. And what we say here is this is the permission I wanted to get access to, and I could use this one to go and read every single user's profile in my test tenant. That's it. So, and from a code perspective, it didn't take long, right? It has 4 lines of configuration, or 3 lines of configuration if that's the case. 1, 2, 3, then the confidential client, which we need to instantiate. I could actually put it in 1 line and call it a one-liner, but let's not do that. And then finally, it's 1 line of code to go and acquire the token. So every time I need to call a downstream API, I need to call this one with the appropriate scope, and lo and behold, it just works. So there you have it, friends. That was a very quick tour of MSAL. If you do have questions about all the things I covered here, please make sure to join us on Discord, and or you can stay later on the stream and ask questions. We're always live on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I think as of this week, we also have a Wednesday segment with our friends Stefan and Daniel that will be covering more IT Pro specific content. So if you want to learn about how to configure your Azure AD and what have you, then that is a perfect place to be. Wednesdays at the same time. What is the Discord link? Yes, the Discord link. Sorry, we don't have Discord on the Microsoft Developer channel, but it is at the very top of the stream, and I will put it in the chat as well. ak.ms/425 show Discord join. There you go. Make sure to join us, because this is a great place where people interact and they ask questions about identity, and we have so much fun. So thanks everyone for attending the last Identity Crisis. If you really enjoyed this content, if you have more ideas about what we should cover next on our stream, or if you want us to come back to do more general content type of things on MS Learn, then please do let us know. We're more than happy to support that and help you get on with your identity journeys. Stay tuned. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes with LaBrina and JP. Finally, JP is back for more. So we'll see you in 5 minutes on this same channel. Take care, everyone, and we'll speak soon. We are back, friends. How's everyone? Hopefully you're still with us. Thanks for joining for the first part of the hour. We had a tour around MSAL, which was fun. Am I muted? I hope I'm not muted. No, I'm not muted. I'm good. Okay. And today we have actually I forgot, we're having somebody from our support engineering team to talk to us about some cool stuff. So Deva is joining us for about 10-15 minutes to talk to us about Graph Explorer and some really cool tips and tricks. So Deva, how are you doing, sir, today?
So thanks for asking, Christos. I'm good. Hope you're doing good as well.
I am good. Can everybody hear you? Just making sure that sound is good. Yeah, so what do you do? Where do you work these days?
Okay, so I work as a program manager with the Azure Identity Engineering team, where I deal with all the issues with respect to the Microsoft Graph. So where I lead a program called Microsoft Graph Care, where we deal with all the issues being used by the Microsoft Graph developers that's been reported to us in our community and in the other forums as well.
Okay. And you said something about the graph. Lots of people talk about Graph Explorer, and we use it all the time. But I'm pretty sure there are some features there that we don't know about, right? Or some cool tips and tricks, and some ways of interacting with Graph that we don't know. So, do you want to show us?
Yeah, definitely. In today's session, definitely there are few of the tips and tricks that I learned across, which I want to share, so that it can be useful for any of the Microsoft Graph API developers.
Right.
So let me talk about just about the Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph is basically it's a gateway to the data which is stored in the M365 or Windows 10, enterprise mobility and security. So the Microsoft Graph, it provides the gateway to access the data, and it provides the intelligence in the M365. And it also provides the unified programmability model, so that we can make use of all the data, which has been tremendous amount of data, which is residing in these different ways.
Right.
So yeah, we can use the wealth of data in Microsoft Graph to build the apps for the organizations and the consumers that interact with millions of users. So today, we are talking about the Microsoft Graph Explorer. Graph Explorer, as we know, this is a beautiful developer tool. Let me share my screen. Okay, so you may see the Microsoft Graph Explorer now in the screen. So this is a developer tool that lets you to conveniently make the Microsoft Graph REST API a request, and you can view the corresponding responses as well.
Can you do me a favor and zoom in a little bit, maybe 2 clicks? Because I've got old eyes, I'm getting old. I'm telling you.
Sure, definitely. So currently for our testing, what I did, I logged in with one of my user account.
Okay.
And this is let me just quickly do a few things, the basics, before I go into the tips and tricks.
Sure.
So let me just make me call. That means far as the current who is the logged on user, Alex Wilbur is a person who been logged into that given account, and we can pull the data using the Microsoft Graph. So it has few components. Let me start from here. Here it provides you the detailed information about the REST verbs, get, post, put, and others. Here it provides about the versioning about it, the v1.1 beta, and here it provides what are the Graph API calls that make.
Yep.
And yeah, so below you can see that if you have been passing any of the request body, you can put the information here. Similarly, you can put the things in request headers, and we can look at the permissions also. And also coolly, you can get the access token for what of the logged on user and what the API call is being there.
I love this one. Yeah. It's a nice hack, getting the access token without really having to write any code. Just come in here, grab your access token for Graph, and pass it downstream, so you don't have to, authenticate and do other stuff if you just want to access your data, right?
Exactly, you're right. And once you run the data, you can see that it will provide the HTTP verb to you. If it's successful, then you can get the 200, and it will tell you how much milliseconds it took it. Below, it will provide the response view, and you can see the response headers as well, what is written back. And see, you are a developer, and you might know, okay, here now I created a call, but how I can get a code snippet for it? So there is an inbuilt feature which is available with respect to the code snippets. So you have a ready-made codes are available here. If you're a C# developer, you can come here, similar for JavaScript, similar for Java, and similar for Objective-C.
This is awesome. I don't know why we went with Objective-C. It feels a little bit weird rather than going with Swift or something else, but the fact that we have C# and JavaScript there out of the box, and it just shows you what you need to, like, you copy paste that code and you're done. Just go tell your boss, it's gonna take me 3 days. You copy paste the code, you do it in 2 or 2 seconds, and you're done.
Yeah,
You didn't hear it here.
exactly. Exactly. Exactly, you're right. And also, it's nothing. And there are a few other things. Say, like, if I get like more information here. Say, like, if I'm using a graph toolkit and
Yes.
I'm using the components, so
Yep.
you can come back and you can get the graph tool component as well in the below. Okay, let's just make a query, and you can see that like the query ad came in here, and you can see that right now I made a me call, so it pulls me the person and it lists the data. So it shows you the code, what is the toolkit component that I can use it. So you can use the toolkit component even along with your code as well. It's not
Yes.
just the code snippets.
Yeah.
Similar thing applies for adaptive cards. Unfortunately, like I'm not using the adaptive cards, but again, still we can do, if you are coming with using an adaptive cards, a designer, another thing, you can use adaptive cards.
I think it's not supported for all the resources, right? So adaptive cards are only
Yeah.
supporting a subset of resources, just to let people be aware.
Exactly,
Yeah.
you are right. And another thing about it. So here, like in the left-hand side, you see the sample queries. So there are like some pre-configured sample queries which are respect to the different or various workloads already been listed out here. So you can find it out whichever you are needed. No need to memorize yourself. Come back and you can hit it with respect to the respective queries, and it will get you the data. For example, now I want to pull the data from my mail. Okay, so now it's telling, okay, I need to provide some permissions. So inbuilt, if you've been used the older Microsoft Graph Explorer, it doesn't provide you the concept and the permissions framework. Now we had added the Microsoft Consent Framework part of the new Graph Explorer. So here, like, you can provide what are the permissions that you can provide.
Okay. Oh, nice. So it tells you what you need to go and consent to, right?
Exactly. It will let you to do what are the steps, like what are the things that you can do it. So just I can give a quick thing, and let me just skip this guy and let me go ahead. And it will list out the permissions, the screen admin, so you can see that.
So does
It will list out-
does this create an app registration for you behind the scenes?
Yes.
Aha.
It does. It sets
Nice.
the consent and permissions in the background for you. Okay, and once you set accept, and automatically it will go. And you can see that once it's successfully done it, you can see that it got consented. Let me go ahead and give it a try whether this permission is sufficient enough to pull the data for me.
Yes.
We can see it, and just like I can click on expand so that I can get a bigger window. I can get all mails informations here as well.
Very nice.
All right, so there might be few scenarios where we might come across the scenario there which might not be listed in this modify permissions. Let me give one quick example, but still I want to make use of it. So here I want to use something called the e-discovery cases. Let me make the call, and the call is here, and I go here and click on the run query.
Yep.
And I get 401, and I get back and I see that it's telling unauthorized because it is expecting the consent framework. Let me go back to the documentation of the e-discovery services. You can look at this is the documentation for the e-discovery services. It's talking about you need to have a minimum permission of e-discovery.read all. It's a least privilege permission. So least privileges permission is nothing, but this is one of the best practice that for any Microsoft developers that we need to use it. Use only request only the permissions that are absolutely necessary and only when you need them. Right? So here I get this permission, I get back and I see that I scroll down, I don't see the e-discovery. So in such scenario, how I can use it? So keep in mind, many permissions might not be around in the modify permissions in the preview. As I said, like this is in the preview, and here I come here, I select the permissions tab. So it will give you the list of all the different Microsoft Graph API endpoints, and you can choose the permissions from here. You can type eDiscovery and you get the permissions here.
Sweet.
So go ahead. Yeah. So go ahead and provide a consent. Once you provide a consent, again the similar consent screen will come back to you, and you need to select which user you've been doing it, and this will be providing the similar type of stuff, and this will be like here, like I'm using only the least privilege permission.
Very nice. Yep.
Right. Okay. So let me go back. So this way, like you can get back and you can run it and you can get the data. This way, this option is been hidden here. And that's the third option I'm talking about, getting a sandbox with the sample data. So currently, like I might be signed up with my M365 developer program, or I might have created a very basic account which might not have enough data to mark up my existing environment.
Right.
So in such scenario, what it does, you can click, there is an option once you log into here. 1 minute. Click on the get sandbox with the sample data. It will take you to the Microsoft, the M365 developer program, and oops,
broken.
Okay, looks like there is a, sorry. Okay, so for this, like I took a snapshot of it. So if you see my PowerPoint,
yes,
I don't know. Okay, so it will let you to get you the sample data for your given tenants.
Yeah.
Okay, and also like it will list out you like whether you can opt for a 16 users or 25 users, and it will list out you the 92 days that you can test it out with the test pack.
So the Microsoft Developer 365 program gives you 3 months worth of data, and you're an E5, right? You have an E5 license on, and you're a full God owner of that tenant. So you can do anything you want. You don't have to ask permission from anyone, which is fantastic if you want to go and break stuff. And then you can test there, and then when you have the solution ready, you can take it back to your manager and say, this is what we have, now we need these permissions requested, because in large enterprise scenarios like Microsoft, for example, you have to escalate and ask for permissions when you need to double with permissions that require access to a lot of sensitive information. So this Microsoft Developer Program is fantastic. It's free, and as long as you continue using it, you will have it for eternity, right? It doesn't expire technically. So 92 days
exactly
usage, but if you use it frequently, then it automatically renews for you forever. So there you go, free data. Who doesn't like free data and free stuff?
Exactly. So and finally, like if you get a free data, you can see that like this is the test users been created already.
Yep.
So this is a live data. I have it like the E5 developers, and you have the data with you, and you are good to go, and you can play with your Graph Explorer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. I have my one final slide to talk where, okay, so right now, like you are a Microsoft developer, how you can engage with us. So yeah, definitely Microsoft loving the developers. So we are letting any Microsoft developers, they can ask their questions in the communities. Whether it can part of the Microsoft Q&A. This is our new platform. I will talk about it in the next slide. But again, you can use the Microsoft Graph tag so that like you can ask a question. Similarly, we are in the Twitter, we're in the GitHub, also in the Stack Overflow as well. So let me talk about the final thing. We came up with a Microsoft Q&A. This is a new platform. So Microsoft is investing in a vibrant online community through our own Q&A platform. So in October 2020, we turned on the Microsoft Graph tags in the Microsoft Q&A, and we have a team of experts who are monitoring and answering the questions in the Microsoft Q&A and also in the Stack Overflow as well. So we would like to encourage you to try out our Microsoft Q&A next time when you have a question for the Microsoft Graph.
Which is a very good point. We already have a link at the top, aka.ms425so/help. This is the link that will take you straight to the Q&A forums. If you ever have experienced, I think we had user voice or other forums in the past that people would engage, and it was very fragmented. Now you can go straight there, and we have a whole team of experts like Diva and other people like Sahil before that can actually help you with your questions. Discord as well is a great place to be if you want to join us as well for some like easy stuff that we can deal with, and then we can always escalate to the team. But Deva, thanks you very much for coming today. It was great seeing the tips, like the third option for getting the permissions. That was awesome. I haven't used that one yet. I will definitely use it. But Graph Explorer is a fantastic tool. I will encourage everyone to go. And if you have questions, make sure to reach out to us or the Microsoft team via the Q&A channel. Thank you, Deva. Now,
Thank you, Chris.
let me do my magic while I try to change the settings here so we can get our friends JP and LaBrina on the stream. So let me, man, this is fun doing it live. Maybe, you know what, we'll take a very quick break, like 2 minutes while I do this so you don't see me double around and sweat my pants off. Right, okay, let's go for a break. And we're back. I was able to work my magic and get LaBrina on the stream, so now you can all see her.
You guys are you are a magician already, so I'm excited about being here.
Oh, trust me, I'm a total noob here. Man, I am sweating when I manage the whole thing. Like, it's like having your own studio, and then you have to do the presentation or whatever it is, or the stream. Man, it's like a lot of effort, just the context switching and then trying to get from one to another. But it's worth it because we get fantastic guests like you, right?
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I know JP and I have been chatting about some stuff, and so yeah, it's gonna be good.
I know, and JP was extremely excited to have you on the stream to talk about things, and then he's not here to talk about them. Like, how about that? I mean, he's joining us in a bit. He's definitely busy, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do at Microsoft while we're warming up JP's seat.
Yeah. So for sure. So hello, everyone. My name is LaBrina Loving. I actually work, AKA Chicks Can Code, chicks with an X, not the other way. So I work for Microsoft. I work in what's called our fast track for Azure organization, and I work with ISVs and startups. So my role is to take the cool new ISVs and startups that are building like the next Netflix or Uber and help them get on Azure. So a lot of what they're doing is building SaaS applications or other applications. And of course, identity is the cornerstone of every SaaS application. So we were thinking, and we've got a lot of questions for you guys. I'm representing a whole team of people.
No pressure. No pressure. We got a whole heap of questions.
We've got a whole load of questions because identity is the most mysterious of topics that we tend to get from our ISVs. Yeah, I've got a backlog of questions for you guys, so I hope you're ready.
Yeah, and no better way to do it than live with us on the stream. Let me get my Bing Google warm up right now so I can quickly come up with the answer.
Exactly.
So are you saying that you only work with companies of that size? Like, do they have to be at the size of Uber or the size of Netflix?
No. These are actually startups. So very much
nice.
so, very small companies.
Okay.
We're sort of getting them ready to become the next Uber or Netflix. So they're building really, really cool technology using Azure.
Right.
And my role is to help them unblock them any way that I can. So if they've got questions, speaking of being Google on the side, so my role is to help them unblock them any way that I can and pretend that I'm a Microsoft expert on all things Azure. and while in the background being Googling a lot of stuff. So
we all do that. We all pretend to know everything until but it's nice because working at Microsoft, you have a fantastic team of experts behind you. So every time you need to reach out for support, you always have a fantastic team. It's definitely not a solo effort here. It's a team effort, at least my experience in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a tremendous team of that helps, and we all are subject matter experts on a lot of different things. So, if I don't know anything about network, I see here. I have a JP sighting.
I finally made it.
You made it, my friend.
Oh boy.
Man, it's been 2 weeks without you on the stream, right?
I know. It's been a long 2 weeks.
It feels like 2 years, right?
It feels like 2 years. In the COVID era, everything feels like stretched. You might have as well.
It's been a long. Yeah, it does feel like 2 years, but I managed to escape for an hour. So
yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rejoice, friends. JP is back.
JP is here. To save the day.
To save
you're not wearing your traditional Superman cape. I was expecting, or Batman cape,
or the hat.
So or any of it.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's just been one of those days. It's been one of those weeks, one of those months. One day.
Well, don't worry. All that stuff's over. Now you get to have some fun and have me grill you with tons of questions. So
exactly.
Yeah. So that's fun.
Let's roll. What do you have for us?
All right. So cool. So as I was mentioning before, primarily my role is working with ISVs and startups, and they're really building SaaS applications. So traditionally, ISVs were sort of deploying their solutions on their customer's tenant, but now we're seeing this uptick in, hey, we can make more money and have a better return on investment if we build this as a SaaS application and run it inside of our own tenant. But that kind of poses a lot of challenges. So especially on the identity side, because traditionally when you think about when a user logs in, it's my username and password that sort of encapsulates my identity. But now we've got this other notion or sliver of kind of my tenant ID. So where do I belong, right?
Right.
In terms, so not just my user ID and password, but now there's this idea of my identity. So a lot of customers are sort of figuring out how do I make that work in my application now? Because before I was looking at username and password. Now how do I incorporate identity? So we've been noodling on some ideas, and I would love to get JP's kind of take on, what does he think about identity in terms of SaaS? Question one.
Well, I mean, it's a hard problem to solve, and
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of vendors who are trying to solve it because, especially COVID. I can't go to a store anymore. I can't go to I can't go to a restaurant necessarily, so I have to be able to order online and do curbside pickup. I have to be able to, reach my customers where they are, and beyond that, I need to be able to take any identity from almost anywhere, right? Like you think about all the stuff that's going on with like state reporting and compliance reporting of who's, did you check in at work before you went to the office and where'd you go after that? And even just more basic stuff of like, take even something like Twitter or Instagram, right? Like Twitter or Instagram, you and I need to sign in as individuals,
Right.
but who's Twitter's actual customer, right? It's typically an organization because it's an advertiser, and how do we get them to sign in with their username and password, or right? Like how do we get them to sign in with their work ID, their corporate ID? Because if you don't work, like if say you and I have our own company and we make mufflers, and I don't know why I picked mufflers, but you and I have them.
Can we make beer? Can we make beer instead?
Okay, beer, perfect. Beer,
Yes.
perfect.
Craft beer. All right, cool.
So we've got a beer. We've got a beer place. What are they? A brewery? Is that what? I guess that's. I don't know. It's a hard word to say.
Yeah,
It's
got
like
it.
it's like Drury Inn. It's like whoever came up with that name. And what would you do if you were at a Drury Inn that was like in the middle of nowhere and it was raining? You'd be at a dreary, rural Drury Inn,
Sad.
which is just miserable. My childhood speech therapist is probably rolling over in her grave at that. But anyway, so you and I have a beer place, right? And we're gonna go. We're gonna build beer or make beer to sell to people, and we want to sell to people individually. So I want you to come and sign in, but I don't want to own your password. Like, what year is it? Why on earth do I need to keep your password in a database? I want you to use a social account,
Yes,
Google, Facebook,
yes,
whatever,
yes.
right?
Less usernames and passwords,
Yes.
please.
Yeah. I want you to use whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then too, maybe we sell like hand sanitizer. I know that was a big thing that breweries pivoted to when COVID started. Was they started making hand sanitizer, right?
Safety first, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. So maybe I want to sell to organizations, or maybe I want to organize an event at our brew house, or maybe we have suppliers and vendors who are going to go take this and put it in a store for us, and somebody at at a Harris Teeter or some kind of grocery store, they're going to order some food, right? So, or they're going to order some beer. Well, if I'm buying beer for my grocery store to put on the shelf, I don't want to use my Facebook account for that, right? I want to use my work account.
Right.
And that way my administrators control what we do and don't have access to. And I think that's kind of the big pivot that we see is when you take these businesses that used to be digital or maybe used to be physical, and you take new SaaS businesses that are building software to sell to people, they have really specific requirements around what they can and can't do with that data.
Yeah.
It's my business data, right? Like, let's say you and I come up with a new Evernote or something, right? Well, I'm going to sell to you individually, and I'm also going to sell to businesses who want their people to be able to take notes. Evernote for business, Skype for business, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I want all those people to be able to sign in. And the thing is, I want those people's organizations to say, oh, you've got an MFA, or you can access this and you can access that, and you need to reset your password and you need to do this. I don't want to take that on because now I got to go build all this stuff in my software. that you're already doing in your own, right? You're already doing that somewhere else in your Azure
Right.
AD administration portals or whatever. And I think that's the big selling point is there are hundreds of millions of identities in Azure AD. If you've got Office, if you've got Azure, you've already got Azure AD. And so why not leverage that in your own app, especially if somebody, if you've got any sort of business flavor or business focus in your app, why not get hundreds of millions of people who can log into your app immediately without any extra work on your side, right?
Absolutely.
So what
Yeah,
do
I
you
think
see?
that. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's the biggest question that we get all the time. So I'm a startup. I potentially, when I first start, I'm going to offer this application maybe to people with like social identities. So I could sign in with my Gmail account, or I could sign in, or I don't have any of that, so I'm going to sign in the old way with create me a new identity with my email. So that's the first thing, and then slowly they want to onboard enterprise customers. So in our brewery example, we just won a big bid with Whole Foods, right? So now we want to, or Harris Teeter. And so now we want to do business with Harris Teeter, but we want them to, we want everyone to log in with their Harris Teeter account. I want to create and have that whole single sign-on experience. And so one of the big questions that I get from a lot of my customers who are startups is, how do I make that work? And I hear a lot about Azure AD. I hear Azure AD B2B. I hear Azure AD B2C. And let's focus in on the B2B to B2C debates. Once we're gonna solve this once and for all today. This is a historic day for everyone. We're gonna solve the debate.
We're gonna bring it.
So, traditional, in my mind, before I really started working a lot with Azure AD, I was told that if I'm interacting with a enterprise, I use Azure AD B2B. And if I was interacting with people with social identities like Google or Facebook, I use B2C. I cannot tell you how many times I have customers that come in and they're building a SaaS application and they're like, well, I want to work with enterprise customers. I should use Azure AD B2B, right? Mm-hmm. And is that right? Or is that the right way of thinking, or is that the wrong way of thinking?
It's 100% the wrong way of thinking.
Okay.
So and I think a lot of that confusion comes from the way that we've described it historically.
Yep.
We call it collaboration, right? And collaboration is kind of it's a super squishy term that can mean anything to whoever you ask, right? And the key is collaboration is about whose business data you're accessing. That's really the big pivot. It's not so much what kind of person they are or what kind of identity they are. Like on a technical level, what kind of provider they use to sign in. That part's actually fairly immaterial. What matters is whose data are they going to access, because whoever's data they're going to access, those people's administrators need to be the ones who control that access. And so the way to think about it with B2B is I want somebody to come in and work with me on my business data. So if I work at Microsoft and I hire you to do consulting for the next big IoT, like I want to put a computer on every desk. If I was to hire you as a consultant to come and do that, well, you're going to help me figure out my business plan and figure out my software and how I'm going to go to market and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And I would invite you to come and work with me there. And that's a classic B2B use case, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Because my administrators are the ones who can control your access. So they're the ones that say, oh, well, for LaBrina to be able to access this PowerPoint or this Word document, that's in our SharePoint and Microsoft, we should have that control because it's our data.
Okay.
The other side to that is when you're building software for people to use, where they're putting their business data in your system, where you're sort of a steward and a host of that data. And that's where you as the ISV or as the person building this software, you don't necessarily need or want to control that access to that same level of granularity. Now, your customer's organization does, and your customer's organization absolutely wants to control, oh, well, this is our business data, so we should definitely control who has access to it.
Right.
So you as the SaaS vendor, or you as the developer, you're now on the hook for, okay, well, how do I even know what an organization is? How do I know who can invite other people from their own organization? Or how do we know that this business data is related to organization X and this business data is related to organization Y? And how do folks get access to that? And that's sort of the hard thing to solve, is sort of one level above what B2B is on the surface, which, yeah, B2B is great for inviting people to work with you, but it's trying to invite, you say, millions of users. Like, let's say your startup takes off and you've got 5, 10, 15 million users, even 1 million users. Well, now you've got 1 million users in your directory that you have to manage. You're the one who has to say, oh, you have access to this or you don't have access to that. And you're the one who has to do things like set MFA policy and do all that sort of. So there's a lot of extra work for you. And in addition to that, it introduces
And just to say, if I'm doing all that, what if I set a policy that's sort of contradictory to what your enterprise does? Then Harris Cedar's not going to want to do business with me, and that would be terrible.
Yeah, they're going to say, well, everybody's going to say, well, every time I go to order beer, I've got to do MFA 4 times. Why do I have to do that? Or why can't I meet this? This tells me I need to be on a trusted device. Like, I don't know what that is. Why are you asking me for this? And that's where that's this new sort of, I don't want to call it an emerging type of app, but I'd say we see a whole lot more customers who are not traditional SaaS vendors getting themselves into this position where I need to deliver software to my customers, and I can't deliver software via B2B. It's just not really built for that. It wasn't intended to be used that way.
Okay, awesome. So I anticipated that answer, and I thank you. So thank you, and because you gave me this really great PowerPoint slide that I would say, I think I want to give you a cut of for this, because literally after you gave me this one slide, we at Microsoft, we talk about impact. This one slide has completely changed all my meetings when I talk about identity. So, and you talk about a lot of the same things, right? So if I'm managing my corporate data, right? If I'm inviting you in to collaborate on my corporate data, then I use B2B. If we're managing your data, which for startups, that's the case, right? You're coming in, I'm managing your data on your behalf, whether it's selling beer or whatever, all those transactions, all that data I'm managing on your behalf. And so in this case, I think B2C makes a lot of sense. And so I'm glad you cleared that up. You heard it here first. This is it. We've completely changed everything now. So I'm excited about that. And I just want to give you a shout out for making me an identity hero, because now I put this slide up and now I'm the well, I don't know, it's a double-edged sword, because I do this and now I've all of a sudden in my team become the identity SME. So I don't know if I should thank you or not thank you, but
you'll hate me eventually. You'll hate me.
Eventually, it's coming pretty soon, actually. So, so that's awesome. So I appreciate that. So, actually, we talk a lot about at Microsoft being customer obsessed. So what better way to become customer obsessed than to actually be a customer? So what I had decided to do was actually become a startup. So again,
nice.
some new breaking news.
What's your business model? Have you been seeded yet?
We're getting there. So my colleague Brandon Martinez and I have formed this partnership called LaBrina Enterprises.
Love it. That's a good name.
Yeah, so LaBrina Enterprises. Well, one, I say it's because I want to step into the shoes of an ISV, but I also say it because you got to have a backup plan, right? So this is our backup plan. So we're actually going to be creating a solution called Podcaster. It's very trendy, right? It's podcast. We're taking advantage of everyone now, including myself, has started a podcast.
Nice. And we haven't been invited yet. I mean, I don't know what to make of that, but we'll skip past it and let's carry on. I'm a little bit hurt, but just a little bit.
That's all right. The invitation is coming in the mail.
On the way.
There.
Okay.
It's on the way. So we've created this new solution called Podcaster, and it's meant to be kind of this end-to-end podcasting management solution, right? So we're cornering the market that way. We've created a new entity, LaBrina Enterprises, and we've created an app. Okay, so now the first part of our app is we should probably set up some identity, I would think, right? So people could log into applications and like do stuff, right? So
Yep.
that might be good, right? All right, cool. So luckily, so here we've actually set up, we're in the portal. I'm logged in as an admin.
Can I ask for a favor? Can you zoom in maybe 2 clicks?
Yep, you're right.
I've got old eyes, as I continue to say, and I'm breaking down a little bit day by day, so please spare my eyesight.
All right, awesome. So we anticipated that you were going to say that we should use B2C. So we were smart and we actually created a B2C tenant, right? So here is our B2C tenant. So what should we do?
Cool.
So now,
I see the model of the startup here, right? You're coming to streams and then you ask us to write your code.
Yeah,
I love it.
We decided instead of when we decided to do this, I thought like it's so boring. Like everyone comes on here and shares stuff. I'm going to use this as like office hours to help get my company off the ground. So.
That's okay.
Crowdsourced startup. It's a new model, right?
Yeah, there you go. You could be like startup office hours. All right, so let me approve my So I'm gonna log in to my tenant here. Let me approve my request.
2-factor authentication straight away. Look at that security.
Look at that already. I already listened to you guys, and I've got MFA set up in my B2C tenant. So
Beautiful.
I at least got that done.
Mm-hmm.
So, the first thing that, like, for me, what I want to do and test out during this time is how do I actually, maybe I want to onboard a couple of different types of users. So I've got some traditional users, and they're just going to log in with their email. Mm-hmm. And then I've got another type of user that's going to be a little bit trickier. But actually but don't worry, I have a doc for us to follow. I want to try to actually log in some users from Azure AD. So I want to be able to get some users from Azure AD to log into my B2C tenant, and that's gonna be our challenge for today. I'm actually I had like a lot more stuff, but I decided to go easy on you.
Okay. So the first thing we have to talk about is tenancy. And tenancy,
Yeah.
so tenant, the word tenant is a super, super overloaded word, especially at Microsoft. And we use it, you ask 20 people, what's a tenant? And you'll get 20 very different answers. They could be things like, oh, well, that's my Office, right? And other people say, well, that's my Azure. And other people say, oh, that's Azure AD. So there are lots of different things.
Doesn't help that we use tenant a lot at Microsoft as well too. So anyway.
I'm gonna refer to Azure AD and your B2C as directories, just so that there's no confusion. So
okay, fair enough.
So one of the really, really cool things about Azure AD that nobody else has, and B is, I think, one of the most under discussed things that we have is something called multitenancy. And so multitenancy is all about allowing users from anywhere inside of Azure AD, so any directory in the world, be it mine, yours, my company's, somebody else's entirely, allowing anybody to sign in with their credential, and keeping you a little bit away from them, right? So when we register an app, we call these things, we have single tenant and multi-tenant. It says, who do you want to sign in? People from my organization or people from any organization? And that's really the key. So for our solution, multi-tenancy could solve the bulk of what we're trying to do. And in fact, in most cases, that's what we see is it does solve a significant amount of what we have to do. The problem with multi-tenancy alone is it only covers people who use Azure AD. So you're left with a gap of anybody who is not an Azure AD customer or an Office customer or an Azure customer. So we're left with this gap at the end of, well, I don't use Azure AD and I don't use Office and I don't use Azure, but I still want to use this app and I still want to use my workplace identity. Or maybe I don't have, maybe it's LaBrina's muffler shop and you're the only one there. And so you just have like an email address, right? Like you just like, I don't know, I've got my Gmail and that's what I use.
Yep.
And that gap is what we're going to use B2C to solve. We're going to use B2C to solve for the gap and then also give us a way for users to just create a brand new username and password. So if they say, you know what, I don't want to use my email address, I don't have an existing identity system, I just want to create a new username and password just for this app, B2C is going to do that for us. So if we look at what we've got multi-tenancy to cover the whole Azure AD ecosystem. We've got B2C to cover social and what we call local accounts. So just somebody who created a username and password. And for your app, that might be the Azure AD part, the multi-tenancy part. It might cover 10% of your users. It might cover 95% of your users. Especially if you're selling to larger companies, you'll see that number skew very far to the right where, wow, like 80% of my customers are using Office, so I can just sign them right in. I don't have to do a bunch of work. So the other thing we have to do is we need B2C to handle that orchestration. So you could go into your app and you could build a bunch of stuff into your app that says, oh, I want to do this, and I need to sign into Azure AD, and I need to sign in with Google and Facebook and all that. You could do all that independently, but you're going to have to do it in each application. And if you have lots of apps, or even if you have just one, it's just extra code that you have to maintain.
Yeah, I don't like to write code.
Yeah. So instead, we want to punt that up to B2C and tell B2C, hey, I want you to orchestrate where do they go to sign in with Facebook? Where do they go to sign in with Azure AD? I want you to do that. I just want you to tell me who they are and sign them in. So we're kind of using B2C as sort of like an orchestrator, sort of like a proxy. And it understands the protocols and it understands the implementations that all of these different social providers, quote unquote, social providers have, so that we don't have to do any of that manual work ourselves. So for B2C, for us to start getting that going, we've got two things we need to do. So the first thing we'll do is cover the local user case, which should already be there by default. So if we look under identity providers, we should see that we have local available. So it says local account email. Now, none of the other ones are configured. Mm-hmm. So
I did very minimum work.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
That's the startup mentality. I like it.
Yeah. Low barrier of entry.
Yes.
So the key here is we've already got local accounts, and we could configure whatever social accounts we want. We don't need to worry about social. We don't have to configure social right now because whatever. But we've got emails. We've always got a local account, so our users can create a username and password. So our two account types are going to be: you work for an org that uses Azure AD, or you use a new username and password just for our app.
That's
Now,
perfect.
Sadly, in the portal, we don't have a way to add what we call Azure AD multitenancy directly via the portal. Most of that is because of the issuer value, and the issuer value is the thing that says, hey, this user was authenticated by Azure AD from this specific directory. And because the issuer values can change, because they will with every user signing in from a different directory, right now the portal doesn't support us figuring out what to do there.
Okay.
So instead, we get to go and jump off the cliff into custom policy and identity experience framework.
So let me just give a shout out to custom policy for keeping it old school and still using XML. Amen. I am so tired of writing YAML. So
Don't go there. Don't go there. You got freaking JP.
Wait.
Man, the rest
every
of the show.
time-
The rest of the show is gonna be YAML now.
We had somebody ask that once. They said, why can't we do this in something like YAML or JSON? And I was like, oh, what? Oh, sorry, you're breaking up. I got to go. 'Cause at least XML at least we've got a schema. We published a schema, and we have a decent tool in VS Code to make authoring these a little bit easier, because that is one way to make it worse, which is to do with them in YAML. But anyway.
there is a lot to custom policies, so yeah, I appreciate that. So but I just had to get that dig in there. I was like, because I've been working with the YAML millennials, and I feel like the old lady shouting the kids to get off their lawn. So I appreciate the XML. So everyone, we're gonna learn something new. XML. It's what your grandma and grandpa developers used to use.
So the whole premise.
I said we're old.
The whole premise behind identity experience framework is that if you can't do it in the portal, and if you can't do it out of the box, you can use a fairly specific set of XML files to achieve more results. Okay. So certain things that you can't do in the portal, you can do in custom policy, and that's where we see most of the customization, right? That's where we see customers who have really specific requirements or who have to do things in a very specific way. That's where custom policies come in to make it, I don't want to say easier, but achievable. To do the things that they need to do, this is sort of, it's a little bit of a tax, I guess, that they have to go through. So,
fair enough.
So the first thing to start with is when we're creating custom policies, there are a few things we have to do to set up our directory to be able to use them. And that requires us to go register a couple of applications ourselves. So actually, somebody created an app. I found a web app specifically that does.
There's an app for that.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's in the docs, so we'll do what the docs tell us to do.
But offline, will holla at me. All right.
So
cool.
the first thing, well, you know what? Actually, this is a great place for us to use this tool. So
for us to break things, cool. LaBrandon, I don't know if you knew this though. We do have a launch date like tomorrow, so.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
We have
startup time.
We have 62 minutes. So one of our developer PFEs, field engineers. Actually, I guess I think they're
not called anymore like that. CSCs now. Right?
Customer.
Named Marius, he made an amazing tool that goes and does all of the configuration for you. So I'm going to put the link here so that you can go check it out.
Yes.
And I've never tried it. It's relatively new, but I think this is a great forum for us to try it out on. It's b2ciefsetup.azurewebsites.net.
Okay, this could be awesome.
Yeah. So this is gonna. If you go to look at the docs, you'll see we have to register a couple of apps and we have to make a few changes in order to and add some keys and things like that, right? In fact, I think if you hit show details, it'll show you what's going to happen. So it's going to create a few different things. So what we'll do. So all we have to do here is put in our B2C domain name.
LaBrandon B2C.
Okay. You can create a dummy Facebook secret if you'd like. The reason for that is that we have a bunch of sample policies that are sort of the starter pack, and they have Facebook configured by default. So if you're missing the secrets, things will break, and it causes a bunch of issues. So
yeah, I meant to talk to someone about that when I was doing some testing. All right, cool. So check this.
So check that box, and then we'll leave the validate only cleared, and we'll do a submit. And you are likely going to be prompted to sign in, and we'll have to sign in. And this is another point of confusion: is there are accounts that sign into B2C as users of B2C, and then there are also accounts that can sign into the underlying Azure AD that live underneath it. So B2C is sort of bolted on top of Azure AD. So a lot of the plumbing is handled by Azure AD, but B2C itself is a bunch of kind of like extensions almost, if you want to think about it like that, on top of Azure AD. So what that means is that when we create a user account, we have two ways to create a user account. We create a B2C user account, which is a user who can sign in via B2C and go through a policy and whatever. But then you can also sign in as an administrator as just with as a normal Azure AD user, because you're in that directory as a guest. So when you signed in earlier to get to the portal, you used whatever account you created it with, and you're not signing in through a B2C as a B2C user. You're signing in essentially as an administrative user to go and manage the underlying bits. So go ahead and hit submit.
Oops.
And use the account. Yeah, use that account from earlier.
Shout out to Brandon for our logo, because that's the first part of being a really good startup.
You spent 6 months on the logo, right?
Is the logo.
Yeah.
And the domain.
So
And the domain.
we're official.
Okay.
Should I check this? Yeah. Okay. And the
So-
domain, yeah.
So you can go ahead and those pretty much those are pretty elevated permissions. So an admin is gonna be the only one who can do that. Because what this tool has to do is a fairly elevated set of things. It's got to create policy keys, and it's got to create different app registrations and things. So this is fairly privileged, and so just anyone who's watching this, just make sure that you really understand what you're giving this application access to do. And I think Marius is a really sharp, super smart person when it comes to B2C. So I'm sure there's nothing malicious in here, but as a good policy, it's good to make sure, always good to make sure that you're looking at the right thing. So the one thing we want to check is we want to make sure up in the URL that this is for LaBrandonB2C.onmicrosoft.com, and it looks like it is. So that's good. That way it's being applied to the correct directory. And then we'll hit accept, and we'll be ready to go.
Easy as that.
All right.
And if this does everything, then that's going to be fantastic, because it is such a pain. Like, we have to register two applications, which the Identity Experience Framework app and then the Proxy Identity Experience Framework app. Those two things have to be created. And they have very specific permissions for each one of them. And then with the extensions have the extension app itself, which is where a lot of the data is stored, that gets stuck in there too. So scroll down a little bit.
So
Let's see.
So this is interesting, because this feels a little bit like, when your teacher tells you the long way to do stuff. So like for the last 2 weeks, I've been doing this the long way, and then all of a sudden your teacher is like, "Oh, just kidding. Here's the shortcut.
Just
all
push
right,
a button
thanks.
and we'll do it.
Thanks a lot for making me struggle through that. That's cool. All right.
Well,
so
at least now you know, right? So, okay. So the other thing that we have to do is now we need to go get our starter policies, and so those are on GitHub. There may be a link somewhere in his. I'm not sure if there's a link anywhere in here, but there is a set of. Okay, good.
Yeah. Where is it? Somewhere down here it tells us where to. Thought it was in here.
It's in the prerequisites. It might be under that getting started article. Get started with custom policies in B2C. That's usually where it is.
Okay, let's look here. Under custom policy overview. It is showing there. Oh,
there we go. Starter pack. Yep. So let's grab that starter pack.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
And there's the zip. And in there, we're going to have there's going to be a set of folders, and we're going to look for a specific folder, and that's going to be our sort of working set.
Okay, cool.
One of
And I also have-
our community members, Bolt, does a lot with custom policy and has written all sorts of neat automation and stuff for swapping things out back and forth and changing IDs and all the sort of stuff that you have to do, which is pretty cool. So
Awesome. All right, cool. So I'm gonna just take this zip and I'm doing some stuff off screen.
Bolt has already
sure.
stolen the repo, he says. He's on the case.
I know this is like legit exciting because you have no idea how many hours we've all wasted. Well, shouldn't say wasted because we learned some things. We
That's
learned
right.
some things, everyone. So
you win or you learn.
So here's my starter pack. It's extracting. Give it a minute.
Okay.
Wow, that starter pack is a lot.
Well, while the starter pack is doing its thing, let's go. We're going to go register so in order for us to build this link between B2C and the rest of the ecosystem, we have to register an app somewhere, and that app registration is the thing that gives us our multi-tenant link. Now, we can do it in the underlying B2C directory, the one that pins underneath it, but I've seen that just adds such an immense amount of confusion that it tends to cause problems. So instead, let's use a separate sort of normal corporate directory, not ours, not the Microsoft corporate directory, because we can't approve anything there.
Yes.
But if we have one,
We do have one.
okay.
LaBrina Enterprises is on the ball. We're not
Okay,
your
good.
average start.
Nice.
We're not
So
your
you've
average
got one.
startup. So this is
Okay.
our Azure AD.
Okay. So in here, we're going to register a new app. And this is going to act as a link. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind here. Depending on what kind of, and if you want to go ahead and register one, we can
Yep.
step through that. One of the things to keep in mind is that this will be the single link between B2C and the rest of the Azure AD ecosystem. Depending on the suite of apps or the number of apps that you need to use, there is a possibility that some of them may have really different requirements in terms of what you want your customers to be able to do. And so because of that, you may actually end up registering more than one, so that your customers, because they'll see just this one in their directories, so that your customers can apply specific policies to specific types of applications. So,
Fair enough.
yeah, but in most cases, one is enough, especially if we're only talking about one app. But we are seeing customers who have suites of apps where they've got 5, 10, 15, 20 apps that they need to publish through B2C. And some of them can be so dramatically dissimilar that they want their customer administrators to be able to manipulate policy independently on each one of those as opposed to in one big swoop. Okay, so let's leave this up for the moment because we're going to come back to it. And let's get to your policies now if they are open.
Yep, they are. So here's my starter pack. You want me to open this in VS Code?
Sure. Actually, just open the. There's a folder in here called Social and Local. Let's just open Social and Local, and let's just open those 5 because otherwise it's a big mess because there are a bunch of extra files. And so we'll just use that one.
All right, cool.
And here's
I'm
a-
gonna open up another version of VS Code just so we don't get confused.
So in the address bar where this PC, you can actually type code period, and it'll open right up from there.
Yes.
Wait,
You know
here?
that, now you know.
Yep. Code period. Code space period. Sorry.
Like this?
Yeah.
Enter.
Oh,
Oh.
front door.
Oh, whoa.
Wait.
Well, maybe not. Never mind.
Oh, no.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Almost. Oh, look at that blue theme.
actually,
I love the theme. Which theme is that?
I don't know. Actually, it didn't quite work because I already had
It didn't quite
VS
work.
Code.
That's okay.
But that's okay. We'll go here because I was trying to be somewhat prepared, and I did do some homework. So
social and local. This means I can sign users in locally. I can create local users, username, password, phone number, password, whatever, and
okay.
also social. So this one this is the main one that almost all of the samples start from because it has all the bits that you need to get going.
Okay. So that was an interesting learning for me because I think I tried to start from local and then I had to do a whole like merging of things and then I went back.
Yeah.
But anyway, again, I learned. So
you sound like defeated. I learned my lesson.
I learned.
So
all right, so fair enough.
If we look at the files that are in here, we have Trust Framework Base and extensions. We want to be at a point where we do not modify base at all if we don't have to. Like we're going to have to make a couple modifications, but generally speaking, these files can inherit from each other. So, I mean, if you look at what's actually happening and sort of like when you sort of look at the files and what you're doing, a lot of these files look very similar to if you were to go and serialize an object in C# or serialize a .NET object to XML and save that XML. And so because of that, it's quite verbose, but it also means that these base files don't really change a lot. And especially when new functionality and things are added, if you want to pick up that functionality, you don't want to have to go and do a diff on both of your base and the new base and say, okay, what's changed, and then copy and paste stuff over. So, and the other thing too is depending on how complex your themes are, these files can only be 500K each. So there are certainly cases where you end up like, oh, I've got this huge file, I need to break it out into small pieces. So let's start though at the base file, so base.xml. And in the base file, we're not going to change anything here yet, except where it says tenant ID. It says tenant ID your tenant. So you can search for your tenant.onmicrosoft.com, and we're going to change that everywhere to be yours.
Actually, so we could just do.
Yep.
Cool.
So we're going to make that change, and we have to make that change in all 5 of those files. Now this file is extremely long because it pretty much has all of the bits that you need to get up and going. So this one's quite long.
Okay.
The next one in the hierarchy. So you'll notice this one has policy ID is B2C_1A_ Trust Framework Base. If we look at the next one, which is extensions. Under the extensions file, it's going to be a little bit different. So you'll notice there's a tenant ID, which we have to change. The policy ID is different, but there's also this base policy element. And that base policy element, that's how we get our inheritance. And so what we're saying here is that this policy, LaBrandon B2C.onmicrosoft.com WAC B2C1A Trust Framework Extensions inherits from this other base policy.
Okay.
And what's cool about that is you could even take one small bit out of the base file, bring it into an upstream file, and reference just the part that you need, and it's additive on top, which is super cool because if you need to make changes, instead of having to make changes in the base files, you can make changes in higher level files. And as new updates come out to these policies, you don't have to go and redo the whole thing. Okay, so we've got this here. And then if we go, your other ones are going to have to change too. Your sign up, but the only one we're going to worry about today is sign up or sign in. So let's go to sign up or sign in and make that change there too.
And yes, all right.
So if you look at those, if we got those 5 files, Trust Framework Base is sort of at the root, and then inheriting from that is Trust Framework Extensions. And then inheriting from Trust Framework Extensions is all 3 of these files.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yep.
got it.
So sign up or sign in, you'll notice it inherits from extensions, and the other 2 are going to inherit from extensions too.
Okay.
So since the only thing we're going to worry about today is sign up and
Yeah,
sign
when I
in,
do
we won't
sign-
worry about the other
that's
2.
fine.
So, Okay, now so scroll down just a little bit in this file, and let's look at our default user journey. So our user journey is a thing that a user goes to, right? Once the user journey, it says default user journey, and the reference is this sign up or sign in. That sign up or sign in is actually defined in the base file, and we're actually not going to change it because we don't have to today. Well, we might have to make a couple changes, but nothing too major. But this is relying party object. This is your application. So this is essentially, okay, what does my app expect to come out of this? Okay. And you'll notice some of them have this thing called partner claim type on it. So that object ID, it says partner claim type is sub. So that reference is referencing a specific claim. So we're saying, hey, the object ID claim that we have, cool, how do we reference that? And then it's saying, when you send this out, I want you to send it out, instead of being the object ID claim, I want you to send it out as the sub claim, which is subject. Okay. So depending on your apps and what they're expecting, because you see this a lot with like off-the-shelf software and vendor apps, like they may be expecting a totally different set of claims, and here's where you can change what those names look like.
Okay, got it.
And then protocol name, OpenID Connect is also here, but so like if you had to do SAML or something different, you could change that. But luckily we don't have to change that because we're not building an app for 1997 that would need SAML. So
we're not going in the future. All right.
Yeah. So I guess if we go far enough forward, do we just end up going backward? Okay. So let's get back to your doc for setting up Azure AD multi-tenancy.
Save all these. All right. So cool.
Okay.
So what do we want to do?
So the first thing we need to do, let's go back to the B2C portal.
Yep.
And under policy keys, we need to add a new policy key. And we can call this policy key, we'll use the one that the docs say. And this is essentially a place for us to store secrets. So we don't have to, we can roll those secrets and things independently, don't have to have them in our thing. So we're going to add a new secret. And this secret is, we're going to call it B2C_1A. Well, you've already got one called AAD App Secret. That's essentially what we want it to be called, is AAD App Secret.
I'm going to just, should I, yeah, because
you can delete it. That's fine. Because we're going to create one, so that's fine.
Oh, Jesus. Yes, I'm sure. Oops, that's funny.
Coming back?
Might be. Oh, no, still not back yet. Oh, no, something's happening. Let's see what happens.
I'm reloading. Is it my connection? I think it's my... No, we should be back now.
No.
We're back.
Yeah. Okay, good.
We're doing secret stuff, so we had to pretend that we dropped off the screen, right?
All right, so anyway.
Okay, so we've got the secret.
Yeah.
Now this is the secret, and signature is fine. So this is the secret that represents your... this is a secret for your Azure AD app. So that app that we created just to get us back to the big Azure AD ecosystem, this is the secret for that app. So we want to save it. So go ahead and create that.
All right.
And, okay, that looks good.
Just to interrupt, like, this is interesting. So that, I did not have these here before. Mm-hmm. Or some of these. I think that's what, so the cool app, the cool B2C IEF setup web created all those. So that's awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So let's go now. So now we need to go back to your application, your multi-tenant app in Azure AD. And we have to configure that to say, hey, where do I send tokens when we're done? So let's go to authentication.
Hold on 1 second. I just want to make sure that I keep stuff just in case we need it. All right, cool. What is it? Sorry.
Authentication. The authentication blade. Yep. So in here, we're going to essentially configure B2C as the app that this is, right? So we're going to add a platform. We're going to add the web platform.
Yep. And then we're going to use that.
Yep, we're going to use that specific endpoint for your directory.
Right. So it's this one, but then I just need to replace my LaBrandon B2C.
LaBrandon. Yep. So your B2C, we've got to change that to be the other.
Yeah. see, and then we're just going to also change this one too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool.
And then OAuth 2 response, cool. And then go ahead and check. Go ahead and check implicit for that one. Actually, you know what? I don't think you have to. I think it's okay. I don't think we have to do that anymore. So that's cool. So go ahead and hit configure. And now, the only other thing we need from this app is we need the client ID for this application, the application ID.
Got it.
Okay.
I'm saving these in a little special place, so we're good.
Okay, good.
All right.
Okay.
So now we go back to our here.
So now we got to go back to our XML. So you're going to have a big blob of XML that we have to copy. So that's
Yay.
actually in the docs. So you can go grab that big blob of XML, and then we'll take a look at what's going on inside
All
of it.
right. So we've registered our app. We've created our policy key. Yes. Now we need to grab this.
That's it. That's what we need. Yep.
All
That
right.
is what we need. Okay, so let's go to our Trust Framework extensions file, and we could get fancy if we wanted to and do this in a separate file, but we won't worry about that for now because this file isn't very big. It's just got the Facebook one there. So we're going to add a new claims provider. So it's going to live inside of this claims providers element.
Right.
So you can just put it right there on line 50 if you'd like.
I would.
And let's go up to the top of it a little bit and take a look. So what this really does is this is the thing that configures multi-tenancy for us. That's all good. So this is the thing that configures that link back. And so it says log in with your Contoso account. You could also say something like log in with work or school because that's what we call them, right?
Yeah.
Log in with your corporate account, whatever. But work or school seems to be the common parlance. So we'll just call it work or school.
Yep.
Now, if you look down, so we've got this metadata. And so the protocol's OpenID, so this is going to be a typical OpenID thing. The item, so we've got all this metadata, which is essentially the configuration of this protocol. So we're going to say the metadata. So this is all, this is where you can go find the OpenID metadata, which is where all the keys are and what issuer values, all that sort of stuff. And you'll notice that it's going to the common endpoint. So it's logging up microsoftonline.com/common, and that's pretty much the multi-tenant endpoint. That's the thing that says, hey, bring any account over here. We don't care.
Yeah, because otherwise it would be my my tenant ID. This
Correct.
would be replaced. Yep. Okay. Perfect.
And if you wanted to do this, if you wanted to do it where only your corporation's people could log in, you could change that there and set that, and that would force somebody to go through that one. So, so we need to change the client ID to be the app ID or client ID that we just got from Azure AD.
Okay.
The response type of code is fine, so that means authorization code. The scope is interesting because the scope that we have is OpenID, or the scopes that we have are OpenID and profile. OpenID means give me an ID token that has my, my information in it. Profile means give me extra information about me as the user signing in. Now, you could also request additional scopes here, which gets interesting for accessing services. Like say you wanted to call the graph of the user's directory, you could also include additional scopes here and get an access token back. We're not going to worry about that today.
So, and in addition, just real quick on that one, is that I could also, as a startup, I have a set of API endpoints additionally that I'm going to do. Could I put those in there, like exposing some additional APIs or no?
So this is for connecting to Azure AD protected resources.
Oh, okay. So not that. Okay.
Yep. So the B2C ones are going to be a little bit different. But since we're using Azure AD as an identity provider to B2C, if you wanted to access something with the user's Azure AD account rather than their B2C account, that's what we would use that there for. Response mode, binding, those are just protocol details around how do we handle the token. And then we notice this valid token issuer prefixes, such a verbose name. So this is a way for us to say, I want to allow these directories to sign in. So Right now, it's just a comma separated list. And it says, hey, anybody from 0000 and anybody from 1111 can sign in. Anybody else, we're going to kick out. Now, because we want the entirety of the ecosystem, we can comment that one out and we can uncomment the line on 71. Because the line on 71 says, hey, anybody can come in if they sign in with Azure AD.
You got two extra angle brackets at 71 at the beginning. Sorry.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna comment this.
Yep, and we can take 69 out. In fact, you can just delete 69 because we don't even need it.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right.
So
perfect.
so you go down a little bit more, and these are going to be the claims that you're going to get. And now this set of output claims with the partner claim type is sort of the opposite direction as when you're creating an app. So what we're saying is our claim in B2C called issuer user ID is going to come in from B2C or come in from Azure AD with a name of OID. And we're going to get a claim from Azure AD called TID to represent the tenant. And we want that to be called tenant ID in our B2C space, right? So it's sort of the inverse of when you're going to your apps of, well, I've got an identity provider coming in. Here's the claim I want to use and get its value from this claim in from the identity provider. So you've got some flexibility there. Then we've got some claims transformations that need to happen. These essentially are just plumbing to make sure that a user object gets created correctly in B2C, so that they can continue to log in, and so that you have an object ID that you can reference for certain things. So that all looks good. We've updated your we've got your app secret in there, so that client secret we created is there in cryptographic keys. We've got all of our stuff here. So now the thing that we need to do is we need to add a user journey. So do we have any user journeys in this file? I don't think we do.
No, so yeah, that is commented out. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. So and then what's underneath this part of the file? Anything? Is it just the end? Okay.
The end.
So let's do this. Let's go get our sign up or sign in policy out of the base file. We're not going to cut it. We're going to copy it. We're going to copy it up to this file that we're working in, and we're going to edit it there. So if we go to base and you search for sign up, sign in with no spaces, we should be able to find our user journey. And the user journey, of course, is basically the interaction that a user is going to go through in order to sign in. So this is all UI stuff. Yeah, so this is UI stuff. That's the content definition. So that's a way to say, hey, I want it to look like this. Here's our user journey. So we want to copy this entire user journey and there may be multiple ones in here. So we'll just have to be careful. We only select the parts that we need. And we can make the changes right here, but now we've got a different base, and it's so much easier in the future not to worry about that. So let's change. So we're going to paste that whole thing inside of this user journeys element.
All right, cool.
And there's one extra dash at the start of your user journeys element that we need to get rid of.
You guys are good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so now the whole premise of B2C is we have this thing called a user journey that has a bunch of steps in it, and the steps are the ways to say, okay, first I want this to happen, then I want this to happen, then I want this to happen. So about the only thing we actually end up changing here, which is pretty cool, is instead of using the Facebook exchange, this is claims provider selection. So it has two. We can use Facebook, or we can use a local account with a claims exchange. And we actually don't want people to sign up with Facebook because we don't have it configured anyway. So instead of Facebook exchange, let's change that exchange. That's the word change too many times. Let's change that exchange to be the Azure AD one that we created.
All right, and what do I need to change here? I got something in the docs that helps me. It says to
Azure AD Common Exchange.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we're going to have to make two changes in our first two steps. And one is the first one is the one we're making this change right now. And this one's going to say, hey, I want you to use the Azure AD Common Exchange. And then in step 2, if you scroll down a little bit, we're going to get to step 2. And then here, instead of having a Facebook exchange, we're going to use our Azure AD Common Exchange. The name that you just pasted in, we're going to use that here for the Claims Exchange ID. Not there. The ID itself on 120. Yep. And then the last thing we need to do is this technical profile reference ID. Technical profile is kind of what we created earlier. We're going to update that to point to our multi-tenant app configuration that we created just a minute ago. So you can scroll up and get the name if you'd like in our the multi-tenant app configuration that we made here. So this will have it's a little bit right there. Not sign in.
This
there we go. This
AD.
common. Yeah. So see that technical profile ID of AAD Common-Open ID Connect. That is the ID, like the specific ID for this multi-tenant link that we have, right? For this identity provider link. That's the value.
Do I need to make this unique? This common
No,
AAD?
we can talk about that in a minute, but no, you don't have to.
Okay.
And so then now in step 2, your step 2 is going to have, for the ID, instead of Facebook OAuth, it's going to be that one that we just copied.
Sorry. This is step 2. Oh, here. Okay, cool. All right. Anything else that needs to change here?
I don't think so. Let's check. So you've got that in now in step 2, right? As the ID?
Yep.
Or sorry, as the technical profile ID. Okay, cool. Yep. So the only thing we need to do is let's check the name one more time. The name of this user journey, or the ID of this user journey. Okay, so that's sign up or sign in. So when we upload these files, we're going to define that in base, but then extensions is going to actually override it. So we shouldn't have to make any more changes.
Perfect.
So let's start uploading them. So we've got all of our policy changes done. So let's upload these.
All right. Uploading, sir.
And there's actually a really cool tool that makes uploading them easier. We don't have to worry about it today, but I use it a lot for local dev because it watches a folder. One of our buddies built it, and it watches a folder to upload them. So, in fact, VS Code has an extension, and you can right-click upload them. But we'll just do it in the portal for now. So, upload custom policy. So the first one we need to upload is always the base. I mean, if we don't have a base, we need to have the base, or if we make any changes. So let's go ahead and get base uploaded first.
We're in here, right? So we are gonna upload base.
Yep. And we'll override it if it exists. Okay. Now the next one is extensions, and this is the key: is these have to be done in order, because say you create a reference.
Layering.
Yep. And because if you create a reference, if you reference something and it hasn't been defined yet, it's going to cause problems. So, so go ahead and upload that one, and then we'll go ahead and upload sign up or sign in after that, and then we'll be ready to give it a whirl.
Yeah.
I love the excitement in the
excitement.
air. Yeah.
The excitement.
Excitement
It
in the
is
air.
exciting. All right. So I should be able then to try. So I've already got a client that
Cool.
I created. I've got this. Got some tokens.
Cool. All right.
I'm gonna
Let's run it and see.
All right, I'm gonna do just a private window, just because the docs told me that. I don't care. I don't know if it matters.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
So we've got multi-tenant AAD, so that's a good one, and we got Facebook. Let's try multi-tenant AAD. Okay.
Nice.
Dun dun
So it looks
dun.
good.
So
We're
far
at
so
the
good.
common, and we're at common, so that's good. All right.
I'm gonna do one thing real quick. We'll see. We'll see. I might have screwed something up because I did this already, but we'll try to log in with my Microsoft account.
Oh, the Microsoft account. That's brave.
Yeah, yeah, they don't let us consent to much in corporate. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty brave. I don't know. I know
I can see that.
people. I know people in high places. So if this doesn't work, I just make a phone call.
Straight to Scott. Straight to Scott. That's how. That's how
Yeah, I got a direct
Direct line.
line to Scott. Yeah, no big deal.
MFA. I think
All right.
that's good so far. I mean, we made it to this point. Let's see what happens.
We've approved something. Well, I just approved it. Let's see. And now I have to
Consent.
consent to some things, so that's decent. So
Oh, look.
let's see.
look at that, you're
Kaboom.
in. So now all you got to
Nice.
do is give yourself a name and hit continue, and we should be signed in. And if we look at the data that came
Snap. Look at the
Oh,
excitement. Yeah.
in, look at that.
This is my cool happy dance.
Yeah.
All right.
So if
All right.
if you look at so if you zoom in a bit on this and we look at it, now this is
Yeah.
this token was still issued by B2C, so this does not, so B2C consumes your Azure AD token and then
Right.
reuses it. So you'll notice that the issuer, this ISS value, that is your B2C directory. That is not corporate.
Azure AD. Yeah.
However, and if you look at subject, your subject claim is likely is not your
Azure AD.
ID in Azure AD. It's your ID in
Ah,
B2C.
but this
But-
I know this is as our familiar tenant.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
72F. The nightmares.
So the key here is you've got these two, TID for tenant ID and IDP. So the IDP, of course, is the issuer who issued the token you used to sign in with. And if this was like if you signed in with GitHub or Facebook or whatever, it would represent that. And the tenant ID, that is the Azure AD organization that you signed in with.
That was in the XML,
So-
right? That's part of the XML that we got in, right? Or is that
Yep.
part of the built-in claims that comes back?
It's part of the built-in claims. We do a pivot to go from tenant ID to TID. But so what's cool about this is that now your app, your software now knows, okay, cool, this user signed in and they have a tenant ID, and I know what that organization means. So most of these apps that organizations use, they have this sort of concept of an organization on some level. Usually it's one they have to build on their own. But at least now you can map how the user signed in and what organization they came from to whatever the organizational construct is within your application. And then, I now know this is a Microsoft.com user, or I now know this is a, Budweiser user, whatever.
So I have a
So-
question. I have a question here before LaBrina. Or LaBrina can go first and I can have my second question. Go, LaBrina.
No, I was just gonna say. So this is how now, when we talked about that kind of three-pronged identity, now I've got my user ID. Now I've got my tenant ID that I can now use to do other things downstream in my SaaS application. So how I'm storing data, I'm going to store it by that tenant ID. And when that user logs in, I get the tenant ID and the claim. And then I can do that to query my database to say, give me all LaBrina's stuff based on her tenant and her user ID. Okay, perfect.
And you might want to say maybe because you signed in with this organization, you're going to see your organization's data, and you can only invite people from your org, for example.
Okay.
Or you can manage the people from your org, so you can give them different roles inside of the app, or you can allow them to do certain tasks, or maybe you find the right database partition based on their tenant. Like there are all sorts of things, especially for ISVs, because
Right.
my free offer might be you're in a shared database and it's not going to be super fast. And then as we grow, maybe we say, cool, we're going to put you on our own stuff. We're going to put you on our own or on your own dedicated instance, or we're going to put you into a higher performance elastic pool or something in SQL. And so we can say, okay, cool, we're going to move these tenants over here because database design with multi-tenancy is kind of a big big headache.
That's a whole. That's another 4 sessions. So
Yeah.
go
So
ahead.
I know, like years ago, a place that I worked when we were building multi-tenant SaaS, we used sort of a common config database, and we had individual databases we would attach at runtime for each customer because they wanted to isolate it, and it made it easier for reporting and stuff. And knowing what organization they came from made that significantly easier to say, okay, cool, well, this is the kind of data you have access to, and that sort of thing. So the thing is you signed in with your corporate account. So say I'm a new customer and I passed by your website and I see, oh, I can sign up for a free trial. All I've got to do is sign in. You don't have to accommodate the fact in your software that I'm an Azure AD customer coming from a different directory. All you have to accommodate is, oh, well, there's a new organization and I've never seen this org, so they must need to sign up, right? And to be able to get that many, to be able to capture that many users with this really common repeatable pattern, it's an amazing bit of value that Azure AD has that nobody ever talks about. And multi-tenancy in Azure AD is probably one of my favorite things because it does open so many new scenarios for stuff that we can do.
Yeah, this is super, super, super helpful. Like this is, again, you just saved me a ton of time. So now this is recorded, so now I can just kind of send some customers there. So that's awesome. We're all about being efficient here.
Well, record it.
I had a question.
We could put a blog post together and have those steps step by step, so people know how to go and recreate that without having to watch the video, for example. Because sometimes people want to read stuff rather than just watch the video. But I think having a video and showing people how to do it step by step is super useful.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
you had a question.
I had a question. So roles, groups, and Azure Access. So, for example, if I sign in with my Azure AD, right, will I get any of my roles or groups passed down to this token? JP.
I should know you were going to ask.
Now you're going to make JP
Now, like,
sad.
JP says, I'm walking out. How dare you?
Okay. Well, no. So there are three things here, three issues or three things to consider. The first is groups. If you're building new software, groups are not an effective authorization mechanism. Don't use groups.
Yes.
Use roles and assign users to or assign groups to those roles, but don't use a group directly. And in Azure AD, there's a specific reason why, which is that a group is not tied to an application. Mm-hmm. So when I sign in to an app that has groups marked as please return groups, I might get hundreds of groups back, right?
Yes.
Which we won't send those hundreds of groups to keep tokens from getting too big. So then you're going to have to make a call to go and get the other one.
Yep.
But it's the idea that a group is different from a role. A role is very application specific. I am in this role for this specific app.
Yep.
And so what we like to do in Azure AD is assign users, assign groups or users to a role. Okay. And in that way, if I sign into app 123, I get the roles I'm a member of for app 123.
Yes.
So I sign into app 456, I'm going to get roles for app 456, and token bloat isn't going to be a big issue. In B2C, there is no app role. So we can't define app roles in B2C. Although we've got a separate stream and a separate project to try to bolt that in. But
segue. Love it.
But however, that being said, because we built this multi-tenant, we have this multi-tenant app registration that we had to create, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That multi-tenant app registration can have apps and roles on it, can have roles on it, right?
Yep.
So, and this is what we talked about earlier about how coarse or finely grained do we do this? Do we do one app registration that represents all of the apps that you're going to publish through B2C, or do we have individual ones maybe because of specific groups of apps or similar? So you could do some coarsely grained RBAC or app roles on each of those multi-tenant registrations, and now your customer administrators can actually put users in those roles, and then those roles will pass down through the token. Now, of course, we have to edit it a little bit. We have to edit the policy a little bit to pass those roles through, but you can pass those roles all the way down from Azure AD. And then your app's going to get
to interrupt. I would go here into this app registration that I created on my tenant. I'm going to go into app roles and create some app roles, and we'll be happy. Okay, cool.
So when you create them on that multi-tenant app, now you're letting anyone who's an Azure AD user have their administrators put them into roles, because those roles are going to be published as part of the multi-tenant app.
Yep.
That still doesn't solve for the gap in the middle, which is I've still got these. It'll come back, but I still might have users who use a local username and password, and those users
won't have roles. Yeah.
We have to. Somebody's gonna have to build an administration system for that, and that's what our side project has been. Is let's go build that. So it's a gap right now, and it's something we're trying to address. But that's the hardest part is we get all this great stuff with Azure AD via multi-tenancy, but we don't get it with that last set of users who don't have Azure AD. And for startups too, like we said, like that percentage might be really low for a startup. And so for big enterprise software, the coverage would probably be much higher. But for startups who are selling to individuals and stuff to start, they're going to have to figure out what that organization, you're going to have to build that into your app. And, maybe you do both, but you kind of have to do both because your non-Azure AD organizations are still going to need to manage that.
And access to Azure. So once I sign in with my Azure AD tenant, will I be able to get access to my Azure resources by acquiring an access token? Or because it's B2C, it means that I don't? It needs to be
B2C. B2C is B2C is redeeming your token. So in that scopes claim, if your scopes claim was to include, or if your scopes parameter was to include an Azure scope, and you had consented to it, you would get access, and the access token gets passed back through. So the access token for Azure would come through as a claim that you could then use in the app. There's one big caveat to that, which is that there is no refresh token that gets passed through. So once that token expires, your app would have to
code it around.
Essentially, you'd have to go re-sign the user back in. You'd have to send them back through Azure or back through B2C to sign in again in order to get a new token. A new access token for an upstream thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yep.
So
it works, and you can pass them through, and same for Graph, same for other Azure AD stuff. So you can pass it through, but it's not sort of a full featured thing. It's mostly intended for like progressive profile enhancement, where maybe I sign in with Facebook and you pull my Facebook profile photo, or you, extra stuff like that, as opposed to, because the other thing about when you talk about the Azure scenario, especially, you think, well, if you have to have Azure to use my app because I'm extending Azure, then I can guarantee that 100% of my customers have Azure and thus will have Azure AD, and then you just go the multi-tenant route. Doesn't really work with multi-cloud, though. If somebody's like, well, I've got Azure and I've got AWS and I've got GCP, you kind of have to manage all that on your own because you have to go through B2C to get it done.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
I think this is a really good start. I think helps us. Well, I think it also sets the foundation. Like, a lot of times the customers I'm working with, they really just don't know where to start. And how do I start thinking about adding identity into my application? So I think this like gets them from zero to a good start as well. So this was awesome.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm glad you could.
Awesome.
I'm glad you could come hang out with us. This was a lot of fun.
This was fun. Yeah, this was super fun. And the funny part is that I'm doing another presentation about identity. So I'm just using you all over the place, JP. So I'm going to be presenting the same thing a couple days. So thanks.
Hey, no sweat.
Thanks for doing my homework.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Well, hey,
for a 10% cut of your startup, we're more than happy to contribute more.
So
exactly.
As your SaaS app gets more and more refined and you've got more stuff in there, come back and show us in a few weeks or a couple months or whatever how it's going, so that people can start to use it to build their own SaaS and go bootstrap their own companies. Because I think it's really cool, like especially a full featured thing of like I can go and learn a bunch about how to do this. I think that's going to be super useful to a lot of folks. So that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually the whole intent of this, is so that our customers that we work with in Fast Track can go to this reference app and see this is how we do, this is how you incorporate identity, and then we'll have some things around like how do you do multi-tenancy for databases and all that stuff. So you're getting it in the ground floor. So thank you so much for helping me on this. This is awesome.
Our pleasure. Yeah, it was fun to have you again. And
So
just as a reminder, make sure to join our Discord channel. The link is at the top. Make sure to reach out to our help team. Again, the link is at the top and will be on the YouTube video description. We'll put this up by the end of the day today, so you guys can go and review what we've done. We'll probably work on a blog post as well to show you end-to-end how to do it. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, although it's not going to be me and JP this time. It's going to be Daniel and Stefan taking on the IT pro angle of identity. So maybe LaBrina can come back and show them how to, or work with them on the IT pro side of things, like conditional access, MFA, and setting all these things up so we can see how the application evolves. So from tomorrow, Wednesdays, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, we're going to have the IT pro side of things. And then we're back on Friday. JP has already bailed out. I love that. We're back on Friday morning building some stuff. We might be doing some interesting things. Our guest has bailed out on us as well, like JP. So we have 2 hours to ourselves to do some news and building interesting stuff. In the meantime, thank you everyone for joining us. Join our Discord. Thank you, LaBrina, again for spending 2 hours with us doing this amazing stuff for 10% of your new startup.
Yeah, thank you.
Did I go low? Maybe say down 15. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye.